Chapter 1060. The golden toad's tongue was severed by the axe. Blood immediately spewed out of its mouth as it let out a shrill scream. As for the spot where its tongue was severed, it actually burned with flames. When the blood spewed into the air, it also burned like fireworks. How powerful! Zhou was alarmed. Even Ice Maiden didn't dare underestimate the golden toad's strength, but its tongue had been severed by Wei Ji's axe. This was just too terrifying. Wait, axe, laurel tree. Don't tell me the thing attached to Wei Gu is the legendary logger? Zhou looked at Wei Gu in surprise. The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. In the legends, the logger was originally a human. As he had committed a huge mistake in the process of immortal cultivation, he was punished by the infuriated celestial arch. He had to chop down the laurel tree on the moon before he was allowed to leave. However, the laurel tree on the moon wasn't an ordinary tree species. It was an undying tree. After the axe was chopped down, the wound on the tree would automatically heal when it was pulled back. Therefore, the logger would keep logging on the moon forever. He would never be able to leave the moon again. This was only one of the versions of the legend of the logger. Zhou originally didn't believe it, but with the discovery of the laurel tree's stump and the appearance of such a person, it was hard not to connect the dots. However, legend has it that the laurel tree can't be chopped down. Why is there only a stump left? How did the logger die? Zhou was puzzled. While Zhou was pondering over it, the injured golden toad retreated into Moon Palace. The possessed Wei Gu also walked in. If you want to leave, this is the best opportunity, Ice Maiden reminded him. Director General Shun, are you returning to the spacecraft? Zhou asked Shin-Yuchi. Shin-Yuchi pondered for a moment and said, Little Wei has made such a huge sacrifice. Since he can still be saved, we can't abandon him. We have to think of a solution. Zhou was somewhat surprised. He never expected Shin-Yuchi to say such a thing. In that case, you are going in to save him? Zhou asked Shin-Yuchi. I can only say that I'm going in to take a look. If there's a chance, I'll save him. If there's no chance, I won't send myself to my death. I'll just do my best, Shin-Yuchi invited. You and Wei Gu are classmates. You won't abandon him, right? We're only from the same school, not the same batch. We don't have much interaction, nor do we have any friendship. If you want to save them, do it yourself. I'm not in the mood to take risks, Zhou said. Shin-Yuchi was slightly taken aback, but he did not say anything else. He brought Wang Qiyuan into the Moon Palace. After they entered, Zhou took out his phone and snapped a picture of the tiny palm symbol behind the words Moon Palace. With a click, the screen of the phone suddenly changed to loading. I wonder if Chang'e really exists in Moon Palace. When the time comes, a Chang'e companion beast will drop. It should be very interesting, right? Zhou saw that his phone was constantly downloading. It didn't look like it could be downloaded in a short period of time. Should I go in? Zhou looked at the door of Moon Palace. The cold air inside was like fog, preventing him from seeing anything. Truth listener's ability couldn't seep in either. If I were you, I wouldn't choose to enter, the Ice Maiden suddenly said. Why? Zhou looked at the Ice Maiden. The Ice Maiden said, the existence that possessed your classmate is too powerful. Golden Toad's strength isn't weaker than the present me, but he was able to severely injure it with one strike. With such strength, even Grim Demon might not be able to win. It's best you consider it carefully. After a pause, the Ice Maiden continued. Furthermore, this matter is a little strange. According to what I know, it's impossible for humans to advance to the mythical stage with their own strength, much less reach the terror grade. That creature says that he's human, but his strength is very terrifying among the terror grade. Unless he's not human, there must be something hidden. Zhou didn't say a word as he looked at the door of Moon Palace in silence. He didn't care if the person who possessed Wei Gu was human or not, but there was one thing that Zhou was very concerned about. Shin-Yuchi had actually taken the risk of entering a place like Moon Palace for Wei Gu. No matter how he thought about it, something seemed amiss. Do you think it's possible that Shin-Yuchi knew of the existence of the bone pottery jar from the beginning? Zhou said after some thought. What do you mean? If he knew, why would he take the risk here? The Ice Maiden frowned. That's right. That really doesn't make sense. But there's something else that doesn't make sense. Although I haven't interacted much with Wei Gu, I know him a little. He's definitely not someone who will sacrifice himself for a place like the Bureau. He actually took the initiative to take the risk. This doesn't seem like his character. Could it be that he was forced into a corner? After all, even if they really drew lots, Shin Yuqi might have tampered with it. There's a high chance that the person who goes in the end will still be him. He might as well take the initiative. If he succeeds, he can still obtain Shin Yuqi's appreciation in the future, the Ice Maiden said. No, Wei Gu knows that Shin Yuqi is afraid of me. If he really needs to risk his life, he will likely seek my help. It's impossible for him to use hand gestures to stop me from intervening. Zhou paused before continuing. Is it possible that Wei Gu also recognizes bone pottery and knows what's inside? That's why he took the initiative to take the risk. That doesn't seem reasonable, the Ice Maiden said with a frown. But adding the two unreasonable things together seems to make sense. Otherwise, I really can't figure out why Wei Gu and Shin Yuqi would do such an unreasonable thing, Zhou said. It's not difficult to know the answer. We'll know once we go in and take a look, the Ice Maiden said as she looked at the door of Moon Palace. Then let's go in and take a look. Zhou glanced at his phone and realized that it was still downloading. He got the Ice Maiden to lead the way, and the two of them entered Moon Palace's door. He didn't feel much outside the door, but just as he entered, Zhou felt a terrifying chill. It passed through the space suit that could withstand low temperatures, making Zhou shiver. When the Ice Maiden walked over, Zhou immediately felt the chill dissipate significantly as his body warmed up. How did Shin Yuqi and the others survive such low temperatures? Zhou found it increasingly odd. Even his body couldn't withstand it. He didn't believe that Shin Yuqi and Wang Qiyuan could withstand such a low temperature. Thankfully, with the Ice Maiden, a cold elemental expert, around, the chill naturally receded wherever she went. Zhou could vaguely see many jade buildings in the cold fog, like a mythical immortal realm. Chapter 1061. Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded from the depths of Moon Palace. Then, Zhou saw faint red flames flickering in the distant cold fog. It was as though a building had caught fire in the fog. The fog was mixed with flames and smoke, making the red light in the white fog look strange. Is Wei Gu fighting? Zhou felt as though the entire Moon Palace was trembling. The cold fog didn't feel as cold as before. Ice Maiden led the way while Zhou followed behind as they headed deeper into Moon Palace. In such an extremely cold place, it was Ice Maiden's home ground. She controlled the cold air around her, preventing it from harming Zhou at all. As they walked, snowflake-like objects floated over from the fog. Under the red light of the flames, they looked like ashes after burning. Zhou picked up a piece and took a careful look. He was surprised to discover that it wasn't ashes or snowflakes, but osmanthus petals. Don't tell me these petals are the ones Shin Yuqi showed me? Zhou summoned an ordinary musical note sprite and placed the petals on it. In the next second, he saw the petals transform into beams of light that fused into the musical note sprite. The musical note sprite immediately began to evolve. It's really it. Zhou was overjoyed as he hurriedly reached out to collect the petals that floated over. These petals had magical effects on companion beasts, but Zhou didn't feel anything when he touched them. Clearly, they were useless to humans. He took a few petals for different companion beasts and realized that they could immediately evolve after being used at the legendary stage. However, when used at the epic stage, they only increased their stats and didn't immediately evolve. Just as Shin Yuqi had said, the petals of the osmanthus could only be used once by a companion beast. If they touched the petals again, they wouldn't be able to absorb them again. Even so, it was already very impressive. Zhou only wanted to collect more. I wonder where these petals came from. I hope there are more. If I can get hundreds or even thousands of them, they will be of great use in the future. As Zhou walked forward, he carefully collected the petals. Perhaps it was because Wei Gu had already walked through the area and cleared all the dimensional creatures in Moon Palace, but Zhou and Ice Maiden didn't see any dimensional creatures wherever they went. There were many jade pavilions and jade platforms, but there was nothing inside. It was cold and desolate. There was nothing at all. If it wasn't for the crazy battle in the distance and the collapsing jade buildings, Zhou would have imagined that this was an empty palace. The fire in front of them was getting closer and closer, and the cold fog was getting thinner and thinner. Their line of sight was also getting better. One petal after another. There are already more than 40. Zhou was delighted. In the future, when he obtained mythical companion beasts that needed to be fed, a single petal could advance them to the epic stage. There was no need to go through so much trouble. Suddenly, a burst of flames lit up the entire moon palace. In that instant, Zhou eyes saw many things clearly. The most eye-catching thing was the spot where the flames were the brightest. There was a gigantic osmanthus tree that was thousands of feet tall. In the flames of war and the cold mist, the osmanthus tree was swaying. Large amounts of petals danced in the cold mist and flames like snowflakes or ashes. There were thousands of them, almost innumerable. Zhou was dumbfounded, almost unable to believe his eyes. There were so many osmanthus petals. Ignoring all of them, even if he could get half of them back, it would probably be tens of thousands. With so many petals, can I advance all the musical note sprites to the epic stage? I now have nearly 100,000 musical note sprites. If they advance to the epic stage, the combat strength of an epic musical note sprite army, coupled with the Golden Harp's unified command, will probably be stronger than ordinary mythical creatures. Zhou wished he could immediately rush over and take the petals for himself. However, his rationality told him that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world, nor were there any petals that could be picked up for free. If he rushed over now, he might not be able to return alive. Under the huge osmanthus tree was where the battle was most intense. He couldn't even see anyone. That was where the terrifying cold air and fiery light shot out from. With Zhou eyesight, he couldn't see the battle situation over there. All he could see were dazzling beams of light. Without a doubt, it was a true Terragray battle. Where did Xin Yuqi and Wang Qiyuan go? Zhou had been searching for traces of them, but after looking for so long, he didn't see any traces of them. They definitely aren't going to save Wei Ge, but I didn't encounter them along the way. They shouldn't have turned back. Could it be that they really went to the huge osmanthus tree? However, such a battle is just the aftermath of the battle. Ordinary mythical creatures probably can't withstand it. Do they really dare to go there? Zhou looked around and sized up his surroundings with the help of the flames that erupted from time to time. After watching for a while, Zhou suddenly realized that Shun Yuqi and company's target was very likely not the osmanthus tree. This is Toad Palace. Although the osmanthus tree is magical, the most precious treasure in Toad Palace isn't the osmanthus tree. Zhou sized up the depths of Moon Palace from afar. The buildings were different from the jade buildings here. They were actually built with osmanthus trees as materials, forming pavilions, and palaces. Zhou suddenly recalled something. Although Moon Palace and Chang, you were very famous, people in the East District would think of these two names when they saw the moon. However, in fact, the owner of Moon Palace wasn't Chang. Moon Palace was only a place where Chang lived, not the Moon God Hall. The true owner of Moon Palace was actually Goddess Supreme Yin, or rather, the Moon Goddess. The sun and the moon had a lofty status in the East District's mythical world. Goddess Supreme Yin's status was far from what Chang Yi, who had taken medicine to ascend, could compare with. Could it be that Shun Yuqi and company's target is there? The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. The area where the osmanthus tree was located was only a small area of Moon Palace. Shun Yuqi and company could completely circle around that area and enter deeper into Moon Palace. Let's go over and take a look. Zhou temporarily gave up on the idea of picking up the petals and got the Ice Maiden to circle around the area of the battle and head for the wooden buildings deeper into Moon Palace. Compared to the gorgeous jade buildings, the wooden buildings looked ordinary, but as long as one remembered that the wood was the wood of the osmanthus divine tree, they would immediately feel that the wooden houses weren't that ordinary. Shin-Yuqi and company are indeed here. From afar, Zhou saw Shin-Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan kneeling in front of a wooden house. He had no idea what they were doing. Chapter 1062. Due to the distance, Zhou couldn't see the situation clearly. With a thought, he put on the invisibility cloak and approached Shin-Yuqi and company. Ice Maiden silently followed behind Zhou. With her skills, even if she didn't transform into her terror form, Shin-Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan wouldn't be able to discover her. When Zhou came close, he saw that the wooden hut the two of them were kneeling in looked more like a temple. However, the temple didn't have a plaque or a sign. Even the temple walls were made of osmanthus wood. However, despite being a wooden hut, there were still buds growing out of it that bloomed with beautiful osmanthus flowers. Upon arriving at this area, there was no longer the coldness of Moon Palace. Instead, it made one feel refreshed and indescribably comfortable. The door to the wooden hut was closed. Shin-Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan were kneeling in front of the wooden hut. There were no dimensional creatures around them, but they were kneeling in front of the door with their heads on the ground, motionless. Could it be that there's an invisible force suppressing them, forcing them to kneel? Zhou looked left and right, but he couldn't see any energy fluctuations. He looked at Ice Maiden beside him. Ice Maiden clearly knew what Zhou was thinking. She said in a voice that only Zhou could hear, "They aren't being suppressed by any power." That's strange. There are no dimensional creatures, nor are there any powers suppressing them. Why are they kneeling here? Or should I say, what's the point of them kneeling here? If this is really the moon goddess's temple, could it be that they're kneeling here to ask for benefits from the moon goddess? But how do they know that the moon goddess will give them benefits just by kneeling? Zhou was puzzled. As the story of Chang Yi's flight to the moon was too famous, people didn't know much about the true moon goddess. Zhou had only heard of the legend of Lady Supreme Yin, but he didn't know what kind of deity Lady Supreme Yin was. Since Shin-Yuqi and company were kneeling here, they definitely knew something. Zhou was somewhat puzzled as to how they knew. The conclusion obtained from the analysis of myths might not be correct. A person like Shin-Yuqi definitely wouldn't take the risk to come here just for such a guess. Director General, is this really useful? Wang Chuan knelt there, not daring to move, but he couldn't help but speak. It works. Just kneel down and don't move, and don't talk anymore, Shin-Yuqi replied. Then, they fell into silence again. They knelt there motionless and didn't say a word. This left Zhou somewhat depressed. He originally imagined that he could hear some secrets, but to his surprise, they didn't say a word. If you want to know something, why don't you ask them now? The Ice Maiden said. Ask them. That's right. Why didn't I think of that? You're too smart. Zhou suddenly understood what Ice Maiden meant. Shin-Yuqi and the others were kneeling in front of the wooden house, so they definitely had something to ask of them. They definitely didn't dare to stand up. If he asked them now, they probably wouldn't dare to not answer. Zhou put away the invisibility cloak and walked towards Shin-Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan, who were kneeling in front of the door. When Shin-Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan heard the footsteps, they were alarmed. Even though they didn't dare look up, they quickly recognized the person from the footsteps. Zhou, you came just in time. We're trapped here and can't move. Quickly save us, Wang Chuyuan pleaded. If Zhou hadn't heard their conversation, he would have been frightened by him and wouldn't have dared to go over again. All right, I'll go over and save you now. Zhou curled his lips and walked to Wang Chuyuan's side. He reached out to pull him. Don't touch me. Wang Chuyuan's body trembled as he hurriedly shouted. Director General Shun, what's going on? At the very least, you should make up a story to deal with me, right? Zhou squatted down and pressed his fingers on Shin-Yuqi's arm as he calmly said. Shin-Yuqi lay there, not daring to move. Wang Chuyuan said, We originally wanted to save Little Wei, but we couldn't see the path clearly in the cold fog. We accidentally barged into this place and were cursed. If we move, we will self-destruct. This story isn't made up. Director General Shun, why don't you make one yourself? Zhou said indifferently. Shin-Yuqi finally said, Before coming to the moon, We did a lot of research and gained a lot of understanding of the mythical moon. However, that information is based on myths and legends. We don't know if it's true or false, so we didn't publicize it. This story is a little interesting. Continue. Zhou Wen's fingers kept pressing down on Shun Yuqi's arm as though he would push them at any moment. The Moon Palace is actually equivalent to a cold palace. It's used to imprison. Therefore, Chang isn't the owner of the moon. She's just a prisoner. In the myths and legends, the true owner of the moon was Lady Tyene, also known as the Great Yin Primordial Monarch, Xiao, Dao, Ming, King Numinous Treasure, Clear Yellow, Heavenly Venerable, also known as the Moon God. The place we're now is the true residence of the Moon Goddess, which is also the Moon Goddess Temple. Shin Yuqi paused before continuing. We believe that the nature of the Moon Goddess Temple should be similar to the Earth Temple. There might be some benefits to worshiping here. This story is quite reliable, but don't tell me that you didn't know about the existence of the bone pottery jar and the dead person before coming to the moon, Zhou Wen said coldly. In fact, the bone pottery jar and the dead person were discovered very early on. When I was on Earth, I had already done a lot of research and consulted many experts. That's why I knew that the bone pottery jar is actually a sacrificial artifact, Shin Yuqi said. You knew that the person who picked up the bone pottery jar would be possessed, right? Zhou Wen stared at Shin Yuqi. I'm not sure about that. I only know that the bone pottery jar is used to sacrifice deities. Ancient magi used the bone pottery jar to channel spirits or invite deities to possess them. However, they typically used water or wine. I've never heard of such a flaming bone pottery jar, nor do I know what use it has. Shin Yuqi was clearly unwilling to admit that he had long known the consequences of touching the bone pottery jar. Zhou Wen didn't expose him and continued asking, "Did you originally want me to touch the bone pottery jar? Why would I have such thoughts?" "I definitely have no such intentions," Shin Yuqi said. "Does Wei Ge know anything about the bone pottery jar?" Zhou Wen didn't say anything else as he asked Shin Yuqi another question. "The matter of the bone pottery jar is a top secret of our bureau. Little Wei's level isn't high enough to come into contact with those secrets," Wang Qiyuan said. Zhou Wen had roughly guessed that he and Wei Ge were actually the sacrifices that Shin Yuqi had brought. Shin Yuqi had originally wanted to lure Zhou Wen into touching the bone pottery jar. Shin Yuqi originally believed that a youth like Zhou Wen, who was young and proud and had powerful strength, would want to study it when he encountered an unknown object. However, to his surprise, Zhou Wen was like an old man who was afraid of death. With such strength, he was still ridiculously cautious. Furthermore, he didn't seem to be curious at all. He didn't touch the bone pottery jar at all. This left Shin Yuqi very disappointed. Chapter 1063. Unbeknownst to Shin Yuqi, Zhou Wen had died too many times in-game. Therefore, he was especially careful in real life. As long as it was something unknown, he absolutely wouldn't touch it unless he had to. However, Zhou Wen wasn't sure how much of what Shin Yuqi said was true. Just as he was about to ask another question, he suddenly heard a creak. The wooden door of the Moon Goddess Temple opened. Shin Yuqi and Wang Qiyuan were immediately overjoyed. However, they didn't dare look up and remained kneeling on the ground. Zhou Wen and Ice Maiden didn't have so many qualms as they looked up. Within the Moon God Temple, there was a wooden statue of a dignified and beautiful woman. When Ice Maiden saw the wood statue, her expression immediately turned solemn. She was even somewhat alarmed as she involuntarily retreated. But every time she took a step back, a frosty footprint appeared on the ground. After just a few steps, she was actually frozen in place, as if she had turned into a jade statue. Although there was no frost on her body, it gave off a very strange feeling. Zhou Wen was alarmed. Ice Maiden was an ice elemental terror creature, yet she had been frozen. It was unimaginable how powerful the creature in the temple was. Shin Yuqi and Wang Qiyuan were overjoyed. They had been waiting for this moment. Now that the Moon Goddess had appeared, Zhou Wen and Ice Maiden, who had disrespected the Moon Goddess, would naturally be punished. Zhou Wen stood there, motionless. Even an existence like Ice Maiden had been frozen. If he moved, he might be frozen faster than Ice Maiden. Instead, he stood still and didn't feel anything strange. However, looking at the wooden sculpture, Zhou lamented inwardly. He couldn't retreat or advance. Ice Maiden was right. It's best not to enter such a place, Zhou thought. However, the Ice Maiden was too careless. Ever since she came to this world, the strongest she had seen was at the Terror Grade. Furthermore, Zhou had the Terror Grade, demonic neonate, grim demon, and the Seven Seas Dragon King by his side. Therefore, although she felt that this place was somewhat strange, she didn't take it to heart. She felt that even if there was a problem, they should be able to resolve it. She still entered with Zhou. Since fate brought you here, you can choose one of them to help you walk the world, do good, accumulate virtue, and avoid calamities. The moon goddess statue's lips did not move, but an ethereal voice sounded out. Zhou found the line somewhat familiar. Although it was said differently, he seemed to have experienced a similar scene. Don't tell me it's one of the 3 mythical companion beasts? As Zhou thought to himself, he saw a pearl and a jade slip fly out from the moon goddess statue's body and land on the wooden table in front of the statue. Why are there only 2? Don't they usually choose 1 out of 3? Zhou's heart stirred as he immediately thought of something. So that's how it is. So, someone has long been here and obtained a mythical companion beast from here. Shin Yuqi must have known about this long ago, so he came personally to try his luck. However, this moon goddess doesn't seem to be picky. She actually gives companion beasts to everyone. Now, there are 3 of us, but there are only 2 companion beasts. The 2 of them have been kneeling here the entire time and are very respectful to the moon goddess. The moon goddess will most likely let them choose first. After they choose, what's there for me to do? Zhou's mind raced, but he couldn't think of a good solution. Now that the moon goddess didn't cause trouble for him and didn't freeze him there, Zhou was already thanking the heavens. He didn't dare dream of choosing a companion egg. Furthermore, Zhou had many mythical companion beasts, so there was no need for him to take the risk. Shin Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan clearly had the same thoughts. Both of them were delighted. Wang Chuyuan looked at Shin Yuqi and saw him nod slightly. Only then did he bow to the moon goddess statue and say, "Thank you, Your Excellency Moon Goddess, for your reward. I want that pearl." After he bowed, there was no reaction from the temple. The moon goddess didn't speak again. Instead, the pearl shone even brighter, but it didn't fly out by itself. Zhou found it somewhat odd. He had previously chosen a companion egg. After choosing it, the companion beast would typically fly over by itself. Wang Chuyuan didn't know what to do. He didn't dare enter the moon goddess temple, so all he could do was look at Shin Yuqi. "Don't go in yet. Let me give it a try." Shin Yuqi was somewhat puzzled. Indeed, it was as Zhou had thought. He didn't know that someone had been here and knew the details of the process. That was why he had personally come to try his luck. However, this was somewhat different from what he knew. Back then, the person who took away the first companion beast had made a choice. The companion beast had flown over by itself, but for some reason, there was no movement now. "Your Excellency Moon Goddess, I choose the jade slip. Thank you for your reward," Shin Yuqi said as he knelt. As soon as Shin Yuqi finished speaking, the bamboo slip lit up. However, it only shone and showed no signs of moving. "Director General, we should need to go in and retrieve it ourselves. Why don't I go in and take a look first?" Wang Chuyuan said as he looked at the glowing pearl and jade slip. Shin Yuqi nodded slightly. Wang Chuyuan bowed on the ground again and said, "Your Excellency Moon Goddess, I'll go in and retrieve the pearl." Then, he got up and walked toward the moon goddess temple. Wang Chuyuan was extremely excited. Although there were many more mythical companion beasts than before, they were still rare. Only a few experts had a chance of obtaining them. With his status, he had no chance of obtaining a mythical companion beast. Now this was definitely a chance for him to ascend to the heavens in a single bound. If the other inspectors hadn't died, this opportunity might not have landed on him. Wang Chuyuan walked to the door of the moon goddess temple. Just as he was about to step in, frost suddenly appeared beneath his feet. Then his entire body froze in front of the door. Just like Ice Maiden, there was no frost on his body. His body seemed to have transformed into cold jade. What's going on? She said she would give someone a companion beast, but she doesn't let them take it? Is this moon goddess a scam? Zhou was alarmed. This was the first time he had seen such a scammer dimensional creature. In the past, most of the dimensional creatures would openly scam him. They would clearly tell him that there was danger here and that he should come over if he had the guts. However, this moon goddess was nice. She would first tell him that there were benefits here. When he came over, she would toy with him to death. Zhou felt that she shouldn't be called moon goddess, but Een goddess. That's right. She's Lady Supreme, Een to begin with. On second thought, Zhou realized that this divine title made sense. Shin Yuqi was also puzzled. This was completely different from the information he had obtained, but his information couldn't be wrong. Therefore, he didn't know what had gone wrong. Could it be that person lied to me? Shin Yuqi's expression flickered. Why didn't you choose? At that moment, another voice sounded from the moon goddess temple. Although she didn't say who it was, there were only 3 people. Shin Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan had chosen. Only Zhou hadn't chosen. She was definitely talking about him. Can I still choose? Zhou asked in surprise. This was because this item was supposed to be unique. It would be gone after being chosen. Chapter 1064. If you don't want to choose, you can have both. The voice that came from the moon goddess temple left Zhou agape in shock. He didn't snap to his senses for a long time. He never knew that he could choose in such a manner. In the past, when he chose Truth Listener and Banana Fairy, he could only choose once. There would be no reaction if he tried again. This person actually said that he could choose both. A scheme. It must be a scheme. This goddess supreme, Een wants to scheme against me after scheming against them? Zhou didn't believe that there would be such a good thing. He felt that there was definitely a trap. Shin Yuqi thought so too, so he kept looking at Zhou. If Zhou chose both, his outcome might be worse than Wang Chuyuan's. Your Excellency, I'm not doubting you. I just heard from others that a person can only choose once when it comes to choosing a companion beast, right? Zhou said, That's right. A person can only choose once. The moon goddess's voice sounded again. A person can only choose one companion beast. Zhou never expected the moon goddess to admit it so readily. After some thought, he asked carefully, Yes, the moon goddess answered with certainty. Then why do you want me to have both? Zhou felt that the moon goddess's trap was a little too obvious. No matter how stupid he was, he wouldn't jump down just like that, right? Although Shin Yuqi knew that Zhou was very careful, he couldn't help but feel disappointed when he saw that Zhou wasn't tempted. Choosing, and if for 2 separate matters. The moon goddess's voice sounded, causing Zhou and Shin Yuqi to be taken aback. Their emotions underwent a subtle change. You mean, Zhou looked at the pearl and jade slip in disbelief. Now that these 2 companion beasts have been chosen, there are naturally no longer any restrictions. Anyone can take them away and hatch them. The moon goddess's words left Shin Yuqi dumbfounded. It must be a scheme. It must be a scheme. Shin Yuqi reacted and stared at the pearl and jade slip in the temple as he thought repeatedly. That works too. However, Your Excellency, your divine might is too powerful. As a mortal, I can't enter your temple. No matter how greedy Zhou was, he didn't dare enter to take it. However, just as Zhou said that, the pearl and jade slip flew out and quickly landed in Zhou's hand. Zhou held the pearl and jade slip in disbelief. Could it be that my luck has really turned for the better? He actually encountered such a good thing. Or could it be that I'm handsome and suave? So Goddess Supreme, Een thinks that I'm a promising talent? Zhou looked at the pearl and jade slip in his hand and was momentarily at a loss. Shin Yuqi, on the other hand, gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He had been tricked by God. However, he still couldn't understand why Moon Goddess would scam him and Wang Qian. Instead, she gave a companion beast that should have belonged to him and Wang Qian to Zhou. This didn't make sense. This didn't make any sense. According to the information he had obtained, the Moon Goddess was a goddess who saved the world. She didn't care about one's background, so she didn't have any requirement for one's physique. As long as one sincerely knelt and prayed, she would reward them. However, from the looks of it now, that wasn't the case at all. Zhou didn't even kneel. He even caused trouble in front of the moon goddess temple. That was a great disrespect to the moon goddess. Now, not only did the moon goddess not punish him, but she had also tricked them into giving Zhou one of their companion beasts. This made Shin Yuqi so angry that he almost exploded. He couldn't understand why this was happening. Thankfully, Shin Yuqi had experienced too many storms of his life. He had long reached the point where he didn't show his emotions. He didn't show anything on his face, but he was so angry that he almost went crazy. Goddess Moon Goddess, you are really wise, beautiful, generous, and obedient. After Zhou, when confirmed that the companion beast in his hand was real, he thought about his limited words of praise and found all of them to praise the moon goddess. He now felt that the moon goddess was the best god in the world. A god with such foresight should be the only true god in the world. Those gods like God, Jade Emperor, and Buddha were nothing compared to the great moon goddess. They should have long abdicated and been eliminated. That's not what you thought just now. Didn't you say that I should be called God? The words that came from the moon goddess temple instantly made Zhou break out into a cold sweat. Absolutely not. You are the gentle, beautiful, and kind goddess moon goddess. If anyone dares to be disrespectful to you, I'll be the first to not let them off, Zhou hurriedly said, not daring to let his thoughts run wild. This moon goddess seemed to have the ability to read minds. By the side, Shin Yuqi's face was even paler. If the moon goddess really had the ability to read minds, he would probably be in a worse state than Wang Qiyuan. Just as he thought of this, his body quickly froze and turned into a jade statue like Wang Qiyuan. Since you have already obtained the companion beast, can you help me with something? The moon goddess didn't harp on those matters. You also know that I'm weak. What can I do for you? Zhou's heart skipped a beat as he thought to himself. As expected, there's no free lunch in this world. I wonder what this moon goddess wants. It's not a big deal. Just go to Moon Palace and help Chang defeat the logger, said the moon goddess. Your Excellency, your divine powers are boundless. Wouldn't it be a piece of cake to deal with that logger? With my low strength, I won't be of much help even if I go. Instead, I might become a burden. Zhou wasn't crazy. How could he be a match for the logger? However, the moon goddess's words confirmed that the person possessing Wei Gu was the logger. If I can leave this temple, why would I need to seek your help? The moon goddess said her abilities are very compatible with Moon Palace. If you bring her to help, you might be able to defeat the logger. The moon goddess mentioned was naturally the frozen ice maiden. You also said that it might be possible. Zhou still didn't want to go. Ignoring how terrifying the logger was, the body he possessed was Wei Ji's. After all, they were old classmates. Be it Wei Gu or the logger, none of them had come to kill him. It was really inexcusable for him to kill them, much less destroy Wei Ji's body. Of course, you can choose not to help, but if the logger succeeds, the moon will be destroyed. Do you think Earth will be affected? The moon goddess said calmly. Zhou naturally knew that the moon had a huge influence on Earth. If the moon was really destroyed, Earth would definitely be greatly affected. It was even possible for an apocalyptic disaster to happen. Didn't the logger say that he only wanted to retrieve his companion beast? It shouldn't be that exaggerated to destroy the moon, right? Zhou was skeptical. Do you know what companion beast he wants to take away? The moon goddess asked leisurely. Chapter 1065. I don't know. As Zhou spoke, he thought to himself, I'm not familiar with him. Who knows what his companion beast is? Have you heard of the story of Chang Yi's flight to the moon? The moon goddess asked again. I've heard of this. Legend has it that Chang Yi secretly ate the elixir of immortality that her husband, Ho Yi, obtained from the Queen Mother of the West. Then, she ascended to the moon and became an immortal fairy. Zhou had naturally heard of this story. As it was too famous, it was difficult for him not to know. The moon goddess added, Then do you know why Chang Yi ascended to the moon and not somewhere else after secretly eating the elixir of immortality? Then how would I know? Wait. Elixir of immortality. Tree of immortality. Could it be? Joan suddenly thought of a possibility. You aren't stupid. That's right. The elixir of immortality is made from the materials of the tree of immortality. After Chang, he secretly ate the elixir of immortality. She was attracted by the tree of immortality and came to the moon. The moon goddess paused for a moment before continuing, and that tree of immortality is the foundation of the moon. The companion beast is also inside. If the logger cuts down the tree of immortality, the moon will collapse. When that happens, not only will my temple be affected, but even Earth will be affected. Consider it yourself if you don't want to go. I really want to help, but I'm afraid that I'm not strong enough. When the time comes, I won't be able to help and will instead become a burden. Zhou looked at the beautiful changes in the ice and fire powers. He couldn't even see anyone. It was no different from sending himself to his death if he went. That dimensional terror creature is compatible with the Moon Palace's attributes. Since you can control her, let her help Chang'e. With her help, Chang'e should be able to last a little longer, the moon goddess said. Just a little longer? Zhou was somewhat puzzled. If that was the case, it didn't seem meaningful. The logger is an existence that can cut down the tree of immortality. It's not something an ordinary terror-grade creature can compare with. Getting her to help Chang, you will only buy her some time. Use this period of time to obtain something. With that thing, you could defeat the logger and stop him from cutting down the tree of immortality to save the moon from danger, the moon goddess explained. What's it? It can actually defeat the logger? Zhou's heart stirred. If there really was such a treasure, it was worth a try. Elixir of immortality. Moon goddess's answer surprised Zhou. Chang, he secretly ate the elixir of immortality? Do they still exist? What effect would the medicine have? How do I use it after I get it back? Zhou asked several questions in a row. Although Chang, it was indeed unkind. The elixir of immortality was just too magical. A mortal could actually ascend after eating it. Although it was only a legend, no matter how weak the effects were, he should be able to advance to the mythical stage if he ate it, right? The medicinal effects of the elixir of immortality can allow a person to possess immense strength for a short period of time. Take the elixir of immortality and hand it to Chang'e. She will naturally have the ability to defeat the logger. Of course, you can also eat it yourself and fight the logger. It's up to you, Moon Goddess said. Is it just a temporary increase in combat strength? Zhou was somewhat disappointed when he heard that. Not entirely. Although the medicinal effects can't be maintained forever, a temporary increase will still benefit your body. With your body, this bit of benefit is enough to help you break through to the mythical stage that humans can't reach, Moon Goddess said. Zhou was overjoyed, but on second thought, if something as good as the elixir of immortality could be easily obtained, why didn't she let Xin Yuqi and company go instead of him? The elixir of immortality is so precious. There must be a terrifying creature protecting it, right? Zhou asked carefully, afraid that Moon Goddess would be embarrassed and fly into a rage. Naturally, there's a protection, but you don't have to worry about that. If you bring my memento over, it will naturally look at you in a different light. It won't make things too difficult for you. Moon Goddess paused before saying, now that the moon is in danger, this is the last chance. If I don't have the confidence, I won't let you go. Zhou thought about it and realized that it made sense. Once the moon was destroyed, this moon goddess probably wouldn't even be able to protect the temple. She definitely wouldn't do anything rash. All right, I'll make a trip then. Where should I go to obtain the elixir of immortality? Zhou thought for a moment and felt that this matter was beneficial to him. If he could obtain the elixir of immortality, he could use it to advance to the mythical stage. He didn't need to waste time advancing to Glimmer. This was because even if the Glimmer Life soul advanced to a perfect body, it was unknown if it could make him reach the mythical stage. After all, everything was just his guess. The elixir of immortality was much more reliable. With Chang'e as a precedent, he could obtain some benefits no matter what. If there was really any danger, he could use the Glimmer Life Soul to teleport back to Earth. It wouldn't be too risky. He could also test it and see if he could advance Glimmer to a perfect body. Head west from here and pass through the osmanthus forest. You will see a mortar jar. The elixir of immortality is inside that jar, Moon Goddess said. After telling Zhou when the detailed steps, Moon Goddess removed the ice from the Ice Maiden's body, allowing her to regain her freedom. After the Ice Maiden came to life, she looked at the Moon Goddess temple in horror. Clearly, she was somewhat afraid. Ice Maiden, help Chang'e fight the logger. Try your best to stall for time. I'll come back to help you after obtaining the elixir of immortality. Zhou explained the general situation to Ice Maiden and got her to help Chang'e. He headed west and followed Moon Goddess's instructions to obtain the elixir of immortality. The osmanthus forest was very beautiful, but Moon Goddess told him that these osmanthus trees weren't trees of immortality. There were a total of 2 trees of immortality on the moon. One grew on the moon's surface, and that was the entrance to Toad Palace. However, the tree of immortality had already been chopped off, leaving only a tree stump. The other tree was the huge osmanthus tree in Toad Palace. It was the foundation of Toad Palace. Once it was destroyed, the moon would collapse. It couldn't be lost. Zhou reached out to pluck some petals and tested them with his companion beasts. Indeed, these petals didn't have the effect of evolving companion beasts. Just as Moon Goddess had said, there were no other dimensional creatures in Toad Palace. He didn't encounter any danger along the way as he passed through the osmanthus forest. When Zhou rode the great Mightvajra bull through the osmanthus forest, the dungeon download was finally completed. A moon icon appeared on his phone's desktop. However, the dungeon's name wasn't Moon Palace, but Toad Palace. Moon Palace sounds better. Toad Palace always reminds me of that toad. A place like the moon should have some beautiful legends. When I return with the elixir of immortality, I'll see how beautiful Chang'e is. Zhou was very curious about the appearance of this fairy, who was famous for her beauty. Chapter 1066. Before coming, Zhou had asked the Moon Goddess what the mortar jar looked like. The Moon Goddess had told him that he would be able to see it at a glance after leaving the osmanthus forest. It would be easy to identify it. Now, Zhou knew why he could recognize it at a glance. The white thing was clearly a huge crater. Moon Goddess had actually called it a medicine mashing pot. Zhou knew that he couldn't be wrong. This was because the nearby craters were all gray. Only this one was white, making it especially eye-catching. According to what he knew, many of the craters on the moon were formed by meteorites. However, this white crater looked somewhat special. As the mountain wall of the ring-shaped mountain wasn't very tall, only about 200 to 300 meters, the great Mightvajra bull leaped up and arrived at the edge of the ring-shaped mountain to look inside. The height of the mountain wall inside the crater was much higher, probably about 1,000 meters. The space inside was much larger than what it looked like from the outside. If this thing is a medicine-pounding pot, how big of a pestle would it need to be to match it? How big would the pills made from it be? Can humans eat it? As Zhou thought, he sized up the crater. Zhou didn't discover anything like a pill. He didn't even see a ball-shaped stone. The inside of the crater was as clean as if it had been washed with water. In a corner of the mountain lay a huge white rabbit. The rabbit was surprisingly large. If it stood up, it would probably be about the same height as Zhou. Its white fur was like snow and extremely fluffy. If it was placed in a doll shop, people would think that it was a large, fluffy doll. Is this the legendary jade rabbit that pours medicine? Zhou had already learned from Moon Goddess that the guardian of the elixir of immortality was Jade Rabbit. Seeing Jade Rabbit lying there sleeping, Zhou felt that it was best not to disturb it. It was best if he could take the elixir of immortality while it was sleeping. Although Moon Goddess said that Jade Rabbit wouldn't make things difficult for Zhou with her memento, he still felt that it was better to avoid trouble. He put on the invisibility cloak and entered the crater. Furthermore, he used Truth Listener to constantly scan the vicinity of the Jade Rabbit, hoping to find the legendary elixir of immortality. Strange, why isn't it here? Could it be that the elixir of immortality has already been eaten by that Jade Rabbit? Joan felt that the possibility was very high. After all, with Jade Rabbit guarding it every day, how could it not eat it? Just as Joan was hesitating about waking Jade Rabbit up, it suddenly pricked up its ears. Its ears twitched a few times before it looked up at Joan. Joan hurriedly dispelled the invisibility cloak and revealed himself. At the same time, he took out the pearl and jade slip that he had previously obtained. He waved it in front of Jade Rabbit and said, Moon Goddess got me to come to borrow your elixir of elixir of elixir of, before Zhou could finish when Joan felt that something amiss. The originally docile Jade Rabbit's eyes immediately turned bloodshot when it saw the pearl and jade slip in Joan's hand. Its fur stood on end like an enraged bull. Holy sh*t, this is what Moon Goddess said. She won't make things difficult for me on account of her. Joan felt that he had definitely been scammed by Moon Goddess. While Joan was still thinking, Jade Rabbit stood up on its hind legs. It was unknown where it had gotten a jade rod that was thick and thin at one end. It hugged it in its arms. In the next second, Jade Rabbit leaped up and rose into the air like a rocket. Joan was still puzzled. Why did this fellow jump so high? However, he was immediately shocked to discover that Jade Rabbit's body was constantly expanding in midair, becoming extremely huge. Even the jade pestle in its arms had become extremely huge. Then, Joan saw the gigantic jade pestle strike towards the crater with the might of a mountain. Holy sh*t. When Joan saw the terrifying might and realized that he was probably no match for it, he hurriedly summoned Tyrant Behemoth. Tyrant Behemoth gigantified and raised its claws to meet the jade pestle. Boom! Tyrant Behemoth's body trembled violently as its back involuntarily bent. The rocks beneath its feet shattered. Puffed. Tyrant Behemoth, who was in its absolute strength state, spat out blood. Boom! Boom! Jade Rabbit struck down one pestle after another as though it was pounding medicine. In its absolute strength state, Tyrant Behemoth was unable to move. All it could do was passively take a beating. Tyrant Behemoth had absolute strength. If it were any other companion beast, they would probably have been smashed in a meat paste by Jade Rabbit in less than 2 strikes. What terrifying strength! Don't tell me this Jade Rabbit is also at the terror grade. Joan saw Tyrant Behemoth spew out blood from its mouth under the continuous strikes. Seeing that it was about to collapse, he immediately knew that Jade Rabbit was definitely not an ordinary mythical creature. Without any hesitation, he summoned the 7 Seas Dragon King that was parasitized by primordial spore. Although this wasn't an ocean and the 7 Seas Dragon King couldn't unleash its strongest strength, the terror grade was still the terror grade. Once it used its terror transformation, it would be much stronger than ordinary mythical companion beasts. The moment the 7 Seas Dragon King appeared, it directly transformed into its terror form under Zhou Wen's orders. Then, it spat out a large amount of glue-like liquid. Jade Rabbit's jade pestle struck down and smashed into the glue, immediately being stuck. Jade Rabbit tried its best to pull out the jade pestle, but the glue that spewed out from the 7 Seas Dragon King's dragon head increased. It became more and more sticky, preventing it from pulling it out. Jade Rabbit roared angrily as it exerted all its strength. However, after pulling out a little of the jade pestle, the sticky liquid stuck to it like countless white threads. The 7 Seas Dragon King was still constantly spewing out glue that became tighter and tighter. Joan was overjoyed. He knew that he was lucky. The 7 Seas Dragon King's ability seemed to counter Jade Rabbit. Unable to pull out the jade pestle, Jade Rabbit immediately turned anxious. It abandoned the jade pestle and used its front claws to grab at the ring-shaped mountain, hoping to tear the 7 Seas Dragon King apart. The 7 Seas Dragon King wasn't to be outdone as it spat out a large amount of glue to meet Jade Rabbit's claws. When Jade Rabbit's claws touched the glue, they were immediately stuck. Its claws were pressed into the ring-shaped mountain, but they were also stuck. It was unable to escape. The more it struggled, the more glue stuck to its body, making it even more immobile. The angry Jade Rabbit's body glowed brightly as its body grew larger and larger. It was much larger than Tyrant Behemoth. Soon, Tyrant Behemoth looked like a baby in front of it. Even so, Jade Rabbit still failed to escape the glue. Zhouwen was overjoyed. Jade Rabbit was clearly a pure strength-type creature. Its terror form was also pure strength-type. It happened to be restrained by the Seven Seas Dragon King's ability. Jade Rabbit, lend me your elixir of immortality, and I'll let you go. Seeing that Jade Rabbit couldn't escape no matter how hard it struggled, Zhouwen stood on the Seven Seas Dragon King's head and said to Jade Rabbit, Jade Rabbit, lend me your elixir of immortality. Chapter 1067. It was unknown if the Jade Rabbit could understand him, but it ignored him and kept struggling. But because its body was covered in a sticky liquid, no matter how much it struggled, it had no chance. Pure strength-type creatures have such a weakness. Once they are restrained, there's almost no chance of turning the tables. Tyrant Behemoth has the same weakness. Seeing that Jade Rabbit refused to surrender, Zhouwen ordered the Seven Seas Dragon King to take the initiative to attack. The Seven Seas Dragon King's tentacles swept towards Jade Rabbit, but unfortunately, Jade Rabbit was too large after its terror transformation. With the Seven Seas Dragon King's size, the tentacles were unable to wrap around its body. All they could do was bite at its flesh. Jade Rabbit's skin and flesh were terrifyingly tough. The tentacles with dragon heads and teeth were about to snap, but they failed to bite through its skin and flesh. All they managed to do was tear off some rabbit fur. What a strong physique. Zhouwen was secretly surprised. The Seven Seas Dragon King was at the terror grade after all. Furthermore, his strength wasn't considered weak among the terror grades. Yet, he couldn't break through Jade Rabbit's defense. This fellow's physique was unimaginable. If not for the Seven Seas Dragon King's ability restraining him, he would have been a huge problem. From the looks of it, I'll have to let Demonic Neonate take action. Zhouwen summoned Demonic Neonate. Jade Rabbit, if you don't hand over the elixir of immortality, I won't stand on ceremony. Zhouwen shouted at Jade Rabbit again, but Jade Rabbit continued struggling and ignored him. Neonate, give it some blood. Zhouwen informed Demonic Neonate with his mind. Demonic Neonate received the order and immediately unsheathed the demonic sword and flew towards Jade Rabbit. The demon sword was simply too small. In front of the gigantic Jade Rabbit, it couldn't even be considered a needle. However, the demonic sword's offensive strength was clearly much stronger than the Seven Seas Dragon King's. It tore through Jade Rabbit's flesh and stabbed in. A drop of blood flowed down the hilt. Zhouwen was just about to shout at Jade Rabbit when his gaze landed on her face. He was stunned. Jade Rabbit's originally red eyes turned black. Then, her eyes curved down and there were crystalline tears swaying in them. Why? Jade Rabbit burst into tears as large droplets of tears streamed down her face. As it cried, its gigantic body gradually shrank, returning to its original size. It cried loudly in the glue, and soon a large patch of it was wet. Zhouwen was depressed. You're a terror creature. Why are you crying like a child when you can't beat him? Jade Rabbit, hand over the elixir of immortality, and I'll immediately release you, Zhouwen said to Jade Rabbit. It would have been fine if he hadn't said it. The moment he said that, Jade Rabbit cried even more miserably. Her tears flowed down like a stream. Just as Zhouwen was about to say something, he suddenly realized that something was amiss. The tears had wet Jade Rabbit's fur, and the sticky liquid that stuck to its body automatically fell off, making it difficult for it to stick to its body again. When Jade Rabbit realized that the glue on her body had opened, she was immediately pleasantly surprised. She jumped up and rushed to the edge of the ring-shaped mountain. With another flash, she vanished at a terrifying speed. Zhouwen was immediately depressed. No one expected Jade Rabbit's tears to be able to break through the Seven Seas Dragon King's sticky liquid. Jade Rabbit had escaped before he could obtain the elixir of immortality. With Jade Rabbit's speed, Even a mythical companion beast that was known for its speed couldn't catch up to it. Since demonic neonate didn't chase after it, it was obvious that she couldn't catch up. From the looks of it, the moon is destined to die. You can't blame me for that. Joan saw that Jade Rabbit's jade pestle was still stuck there. It hadn't been taken away in time, so he walked over to put it away. The Seven Seas Dragon King put away the sticky liquid. Joan reached out to grab the jade pestle and wanted to pick it up, but after exerting some strength, the jade pestle didn't budge at all. How heavy! Joan held the jade pestle with both hands as though he was trying to lift it up. However, the jade pestle didn't move at all, leaving Joan alarmed. Joan got the Seven Seas Dragon King to extend its tentacles to sweep up the jade pestle, but even the Seven Seas Dragon King failed to pick it up despite using all its strength. No way. The Seven Seas Dragon King is at the Terrorgrade, but even it can't lift the jade pestle? How heavy is this jade pestle? Amidst his shock, Joan thought again. It might not just be a problem of strength. Otherwise, the Seven Seas Dragon King would be able to sweep up a building. Perhaps it's possible that only Jade Rabbit can lift this jade pestle. Demonic Neonate suddenly turned her head in a direction. Joan turned his head and happened to see Jade Rabbit retracting its head and hiding behind the mountain. Why is it back? Joan thought for a moment and knew what was going on. Jade Rabbit definitely couldn't bear to part with the jade pestle, so it ran back. Jade Rabbit, if you want the jade pestle back, exchange it with the elixir of immortality. Joan shouted at the spot where Jade Rabbit was hiding. Jade Rabbit seemed to know that Joan couldn't catch up to it, so it became much bolder. Although it didn't dare come over, it extended its head and claws. Then, it raised its claws and made an international gesture at Joan. Holy sh*T, this rabbit actually knows this? Joan was somewhat surprised. Jade Rabbit knew that Joan couldn't lift its jade pestle, so it wasn't afraid of Joan's threat. Joan was indeed helpless. The jade pestle was terrifyingly heavy. He couldn't lift it at all. What should I do? Joan glanced at the Moon Palace and saw that the flames were becoming more and more dazzling. Clearly, the logger had a huge advantage. He didn't know how long Chong, and Ice Maiden could last. Is the moon really going to be destroyed? Joan thought to himself about how he could obtain the elixir of immortality from Jade Rabbit. Jade Rabbit's speed is too fast. If demonic neonate doesn't chase after it, it means that she knows that she can't catch up. Furthermore, Jade Rabbit's strength and physical toughness are extremely terrifying. It's almost impossible to capture it. However, if I don't have any chance, why did the Moon Goddess send me? Does she want to use Jade Rabbit to kill me? There's no need for that. With her strength, she can even freeze Ice Maiden. If she wants to attack me, she can do it in front of the Moon Goddess Temple. But if I have a chance to obtain the elixir of immortality, where is the chance? Jade Rabbit isn't something I can match. Jade Rabbit. I seem to remember having one in the past. Joan suddenly thought of something as he sank his consciousness into the chaos bead and rummaged through it. After a while, Joan found something. It was a translucent jade box with mysterious cloud patterns on it. This jade box was something Joan had obtained from the Jade Rabbit Lunar Prayer Stone on White Cloud Mountain. Back then, it was the archer who had guided him to obtain the jade box. In the jade box, he had only discovered some low-level dimensional crystals that weren't of much use. Joan was quite disappointed back then. He only felt that the jade box might be a little strange, so he casually put it away. Now, he suddenly recalled that the Jade Rabbit Lunar Prayer Stone was said to be formed after Jade Rabbit descended to the mortal world. The jade box was also hidden by Jade Rabbit. He wondered if it had anything to do with Jade Rabbit. Jade Rabbit seemed to hesitate as she looked at Joan and the jade box in his hand. Finally, she nodded fiercely. Where is your elixir of immortality? Joan couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief when he saw Jade Rabbit nod. Jade with T, with it. The it with rabbit to with rabbit with rabbit. With it. With rabbit. With to say, the stone, he say without. With furthermore, the stone door was covered in dust. It didn't look like anyone lived there. Jade Rabbit bowed in front of the stone hut before pushing open the door. It stood in the stone hut and waved its claws at Joan. Joan walked to the door and saw that the furnishings in the stone hut were very simple. They were all primitive stone tools and tools carved from stone. Jade Rabbit came to one of the stone pots and opened the lid. Then it carefully picked up the stone pot and poured it out. A crystalline pill rolled out of the stone pot. It was the size of a baby's fist and emitted a strong osmanthus fragrance. The fragrance could penetrate the protection of the space suit, allowing Joan to smell it directly. Jade Rabbit caught the pill with one claw and pointed at the jade box in Joan's hand with the other claw. Clearly, it wanted to exchange with Joan. You still have the elixir of immortality in that stone pot of yours, right? Didn't you say that you would exchange all the elixir of immortality with me? Joan didn't hand over the jade box as he looked at the stone pot. Jade Rabbit immediately picked up the stone pot and looked at Joan warily. Then it pointed at the pill in its claw and pointed at the jade box, indicating that it was a one-for-one exchange. No, you have to exchange all the elixir of immortality with me. Joan shook his head. Jade Rabbit's face was filled with a struggle. Finally, as though it had made up its mind, it extended its claw and gestured two in front of Joan. Joan was delighted. From the looks of it, there are more than 2 elixirs of immortality in the stone pot. Joan pointed at the stone pot and said, I want all the elixirs of immortality. Jade Rabbit hugged the stone pot and shook its head like a rattle drum. Its body kept retreating as it looked at Joan as though it was looking at a thief. Don't you want the jade box and pestle? Joan waved the jade box in front of Jade Rabbit and tempted it. Jade Rabbit's eyes followed the jade box. It wished it could immediately snatch the jade box, but it couldn't bear to part with the elixir of immortality. Seeing Jade Rabbit struggling as though it couldn't make up its mind, Joan asked, How many elixirs of immortality are there in the stone pot? Jade Rabbit gestured 3 with its claws. Only then did Joan realize that there were only 3 elixirs of immortality. Joan saw that Jade Rabbit's intelligence wasn't high. At most, it was at the level of child. His heart stirred as he said to Jade Rabbit with a smile, How about this? I'll use the jade box to exchange for all your elixirs of immortality. Jade Rabbit immediately shook its head and hugged the stone pot even tighter. Listen to me first. Where's your elixir of immortality? Just treat it as leaving it with me for now. In the future, you'll follow me and help me do whatever you can. I'll also take care of your food and drink. If you perform well, I'll return you 1 elixir of immortality. If you perform well and make me very happy, I'll return you 2 elixirs of immortality. Perhaps you can even take all 3 elixirs of immortality back. What do you think? Joan said to Jade Rabbit. When Jade Rabbit heard that, it extended its claws and counted as though it was calculating something. After doing the math for a while, Jade Rabbit felt that it was quite worth it. Therefore, it happily nodded and handed the stone pot to Joan. That's right. I'll help you keep the elixir of immortality for now. In the future, you will follow me and live a good life. I guarantee you won't regret it. Joan reached out to take the stone pot. However, Jade Rabbit put it away and pointed at the jade box in Joan's hand, meaning that he would exchange the goods for the money. Joan handed the jade box over and exchanged it for the stone pot. He looked inside, and indeed, he saw a total of 3 pills inside. Each of them was made of white jade and emitted a strong osmanthus fragrance. Just smelling the fragrance made one feel refreshed, as though they were about to ascend. Jade Rabbit was delighted when she received the jade box. She hugged the jade box and rubbed her cheek against it as though she had obtained a treasure. Chapter 1069. When Joan returned, he didn't head to the moon goddess temple. Instead, he circled around and went straight to the vicinity of Moon Palace. This was because Joan didn't know how true the moon goddess's words were, so he wanted to head to Moon Palace to take a look. With the elixir of immortality in hand, He had also abducted Jade Rabbit. Together with the Seven Seas Dragon King and demonic neonate, he could have a huge impact on the battle. It wouldn't be too late to take action after figuring out who was beneficial to humanity. At that moment, there was almost no cold fog in Moon Palace. There were flames burning everywhere, and many jade buildings were burning. Amidst the flames, there was only a small amount of cold fog surging in a jade palace. As for the huge osmanthus tree, under the influence of the battle, a large number of petals fell and floated everywhere. I'm rich. There's so many petals, and each one is an epic companion beast. Zhou saw that there were too many petals here. If he picked them up one by one, he didn't know how long it would take. Therefore, he summoned the musical note army to a spot where the battle couldn't reach and allowed them to fuse with the petals. It was very difficult for companion beasts below the mythical stage to maintain their combat strength in space. However, there were also a few low-level companion beasts that could survive in space. Although creatures like musical note sprites had almost no combat strength in space, it wasn't a problem for them to survive. Thousands of musical note sprites pounced at the falling petals. Every musical note sprite that touched a petal immediately absorbed it and entered an evolutionary state. The scene of tens of thousands of companion beasts evolving together was truly spectacular. Zhou Wen's musical note sprites were close to 100,000, but the petals that fell were more than 100,000. He summoned the other legendary and epic companion beasts he usually collected and got them to absorb the petals. The legendary stage directly advanced, but the epic stage only increased some stats. When he used a second petal, the effects would be much weaker. Zhou summoned the evil spirit king as well, hoping that he could absorb the petals and quickly advance. To his surprise, he didn't even look at the petals. He had no intention of absorbing them. Is he that picky? Zhou was somewhat speechless. Ever since the evil spirit king was born, he only absorbed the energy of companion eggs. Furthermore, they had to be of the same level. He didn't eat anything else. There were still quite a number of petals falling from a tree, but they were all close to the battlefield. Zhou was afraid of being implicated, so he didn't dare approach the battlefield. Just as he was hesitating whether he should go and pick up the flower petals, he suddenly heard a loud noise. The jade palace that was emitting a cold mist actually exploded, turning into ruins in an instant. All the cold fog vanished. At the same time, two figures appeared from the icy light. Clearly, they couldn't maintain their terror state. From afar, Zhou saw the Ice Maiden land in a sorry state in the palace ruins. The huge dark gold toad fell with her. At that moment, the dark gold toad's body was emitting layers of icy air. Its body seemed to be covered in frost, but some parts of it had been charred black by the flames. Without the protection of the frost, it was no longer protected by the frost. It's Ice Maiden and that toad. Why don't I see Chang'e? Zhou looked around, but didn't see the legendary Chang'e. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he saw Wei Gu walk out of the flames. He clenched his fist, and the flames condensed into a battle axe that hung on the ground. Chang'e, you can't stop me. Give up, Wei Gu said as he walked towards the dark gold toad. Who is he talking to? Who is Chang'e? There seems to be only that toad over there. Zhou widened his eyes in disbelief as he stared at the dark gold toad. He really couldn't believe his guess. Chang'e, who is famous for her beauty, was actually a toad. Wasn't this too ridiculous? However, the toad stirred up the frost again and stood in front of Wei Gu. It looked like it wanted to continue fighting, but it couldn't even enter its terror form. Its combat strength had been greatly weakened. Even if it continued fighting, it would probably die. Ice Maiden was clearly injured as well. She was also unable to maintain her terror form, but she wasn't as stubborn as the toad. She had already secretly retreated. As Wei Gu walked toward the toad, he said, Chang'e, why are you doing this? Although you will lose your ability to live forever if you let me chop down the tree of immortality, you can recover your original appearance. You don't have to be an ugly toad anymore. Isn't that what you want? Or could it be that in order to live forever, you would rather be an ugly toad forever? When Zhou heard this, He was certain that the toad was undoubtedly the legendary Chong-E. Chong-E is actually a toad. I wonder how those people who fantasize about Chong-E will react when they see her true appearance. Zhou was secretly glad that he hadn't immediately consumed the elixir of immortality after obtaining it. It turned out that the elixir of immortality created from the tree of immortality had such a negative effect. Zhou would rather not advance to the mythical stage than become a toad. Even if I'm ugly, even if I'm despised by the world, I will guard this place and wait for him to come. The toad finally spoke. Indeed, it was a woman's voice. He's just an ordinary human. Even if he has the shocking power of sun shooting, he's only a speck of dust in the river of time. It's unknown where the dust has landed. You won't be able to wait, Wei Gu said. No, he will come. He will definitely. Chong-E shouted crazily. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Originally, I wanted to spare your life on account of our similar circumstances. Since you have a death wish, I can only fulfill your wish. As Wei Gu spoke, he slowly raised the flaming axe in his hand, hoping to kill the toad. Zhou hesitated for a moment before taking out an elixir of immortality and holding it in his hand. He beckoned Jade Rabbit to head toward Chong-E, let me ask you, if the tree of immortality is chopped down, will the moon really be destroyed? Zhou asked the dark gold toad. No, Chong originally didn't want to answer when she saw that it was a human youth, but when she saw Jade Rabbit beside Zhou, she was slightly alarmed and answered Zhou's question. Was the moon goddess really lying to me? Zhou frowned inwardly. To his surprise, Chong continued. However, the tree of immortality is connected to the moon's companion beast by blood. If the tree of immortality is destroyed, the companion beast in the moon will be born. As the outer shell of the companion egg, the moon will naturally shatter. What? You're saying that the moon is a companion egg? Zhou looked at Chong-E in horror, almost unable to believe his ears. He wasn't shocked by the strength of the companion beast in the moon, but this news made him think of something else. If the moon was a companion egg, what about Earth? If Earth was also a companion egg, wouldn't the strongest companion beast that the dimension was looking for be on Earth? If that companion beast broke out of its shell, Zhou couldn't imagine what Earth would become. Chapter 1070. The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that it was right. It was no wonder the bigwigs of the dimension said that Earth would be doomed once the strongest companion beast was found. Zhou couldn't help but think of the scene of a chick breaking out of its shell. It seemed like some young birds would even eat eggshells. Ice Maiden clearly thought of something as her expression turned extremely strange. That's not right. If Earth is a companion egg, wouldn't I be able to find the companion beast inside as long as I dig down? There's no need to spend so much time searching, right? As Zhou thought about it, he suddenly thought of something. Could it be that the ship tore through the sky and tore apart the continent was actually to break the companion egg and search for the companion beast on Earth? If that's the case, they clearly didn't succeed. What stopped them? Countless thoughts flashed through Zhou's mind, but he didn't know which was the correct answer. While Zhou was still pondering, the flaming axe in Wei Ji's hand had already slashed at the toad. Bunny, stop him! Zhou shouted at Jade Rabbit. Jade Rabbit was somewhat hesitant, but when it saw Zhou wave the elixir of immortality in his hand, it immediately took action. It took out a jade pestle from somewhere and transformed into a gigantic rabbit from Terror Transformation. It smashed the pestle at Wei Gu. Wei Gu raised the flaming axe in his hand and collided with the gigantic jade pestle that Jade Rabbit had smashed down with. With a loud rumble, a terrifying shockwave instantly destroyed everything in the vicinity. Zhou was sent flying as a space suit turned to dust, revealing the Galaxy Shell Dragon armor he was wearing inside. With absolute defense, Zhou survived the terrifying shockwave. Jade Rabbit's strength was extremely terrifying. The jade pestle constantly struck out, not being at a disadvantage when clashing head-on with Wei Gu. It even had the upper hand. This surprised Zhou greatly. This was because Jade Rabbit had previously been restrained by the Seven Seas Dragon King and hadn't been able to unleash its true strength. It gave Zhou the illusion that it wasn't very strong. From the looks of it, Jade Rabbit's strength far exceeded the dark gold toad's. Zhou came to a realization on second thought. The logger could chop down the Tree of Immortality, and Jade Rabbit could also use the Tree of Immortality as a medicinal herb. It was impossible for it to be weak. As long as it wasn't restrained, the Jade Rabbit's strength was too terrifying. Zhou wore the shell dragon armor, so the various radiation and environment on the moon couldn't harm him. The boiling point on the moon was very low. Without the protection of a spacesuit, the blood in an ordinary person's body would boil. When that happened, it would be impossible for them to survive. With the protection of the shell dragon armor, there was no need to worry about this. However, Zhou had yet to reach a state where he could survive without oxygen. Without oxygen for an extended period of time, he would still die. Thankfully, Zhou's Chaos Bead had many space suits and oxygen supplies, so he didn't have to worry. Now wasn't the time to change into a space suit. Zhou quickly retreated to prevent himself from being affected by the terrifying battle. Chong, Yi and Ice Maiden were also sent flying. They had been severely injured, so they couldn't transform into their terror forms for a short period of time. It was difficult for them to participate in the battle. Zhou didn't give the elixir of immortality to Chong Yi. If Jade Rabbit could suppress the logger, he could save one elixir of immortality. Jade Rabbit can't stop the logger. Give the elixir of immortality to Chong Yi and let her help Jade Rabbit. Moon Goddess's ethereal voice suddenly entered Zhou's ears. Moon Goddess, didn't you say that Jade Rabbit wouldn't do anything to me with your keepsake? I was almost killed by Jade Rabbit, Zhou said coldly. Moon Goddess's voice was as gentle as ever. If I didn't say that, would you have gone? I also know that this trip is extremely dangerous, but if you don't go, there's really no hope for the moon. Don't tell me you really think that I could defeat the Terror-Grade Jade Rabbit and obtain its elixir of immortality? Zhou curled his lips. I originally didn't expect you to defeat Jade Rabbit, but if you want to obtain the elixir of immortality, you have to defeat it. Others might not be able to do it, but you might be able to, Moon Goddess said faintly. You sure have confidence in me. I don't have that much confidence in myself, Zhou mocked. Moon Goddess smiled and said, didn't you do it? Furthermore, you did better than I imagined. Not only did you obtain the elixir of immortality, but you also brought Jade Rabbit back and made it your helper. That's because I'm lucky. What if I'm unlucky? Zhou snorted coldly. If your luck isn't good, there won't be anyone in this world with good luck, Moon Goddess said. What do you mean? Zhou asked with a frown. Have you bowed to the temple before? Moon Goddess asked. So what if I have? Zhou's heart stirred. Moon Goddess seemed to know something. No, you haven't bowed because no deity in the temple dares to accept your bow. Even I don't dare, Moon Goddess said. Why don't any deity dare to accept my bow? What's different about my life providence? Zhou finally believed that Moon Goddess knew something. I don't know. Moon Goddess's answer was unacceptable to Zhou. What a good you don't know, Zhou said coldly. You don't have to be angry. If I could completely see through your life providence, I wouldn't be afraid of being bowed to by you. I can only tell that there's something wrong with your life providence. It shouldn't be your life providence, but a life providence formed under the influence of external forces. Furthermore, that life providence is too ominous. If I were to receive your bow, I'm afraid I'll be afflicted with calamities. Even deities will suffer, Moon Goddess said. Zhou didn't wish to harp on this matter any further. He asked, Chong, he said that the moon is a companion egg. Is that true? Yes, it's the same for Earth. However, you don't have to worry. Earth is different. The companion beast inside won't appear so easily. Moon Goddess seemed to know what Zhou wanted to ask and directly said something. What's the difference? Zhou asked. If the companion beasts on the moon want to appear, they have to wait for the Tree of Immortality to die. Otherwise, they will never appear. By the same logic, if companion beasts on Earth want to appear, they need similar conditions. However, up to now, no creature knows what the conditions are, Moon Goddess said. Since the companion beasts are inside Earth, can't they just dig in? Zhou, when asked his question. Earth wasn't as difficult to dig as he imagined. A terrifying existence from a dimension once attempted it. It was an existence even more terrifying than us. But in the end, Earth still existed, but that terrifying existence from the dimension disappeared. Moon Goddess said, "Is the terrifying existence you mentioned the owner of a ship?" Zhou Wen's heart stirred as he hurriedly asked, "You actually know of the existence of that ship?" Moon Goddess was slightly surprised. "Is it really that ship? What kind of creature is the owner of that ship?" Zhou Wen asked, "I don't know." A ship tore through the sky, causing the ground to split apart. Floods surged, and the world was nearly destroyed. Then, the ship disappeared into the depths of the crack and never appeared again. "No one knows who the owner of a ship is," Moon Goddess said as she suddenly changed the topic. "Quickly give Chang the elixir of immortality. The logger wants to forcefully chop down the tree of immortality. Jade Rabbit can't stop him. Only Chang's strength can." Chapter 1071. Zhou Wen turned his head and couldn't see the logger's figure. However, he could see beautiful flames burning around the tree of immortality. Wounds appeared out of thin air on the tree of immortality's body. The wood shavings that flew out had already ignited in midair. The gigantic Jade Rabbit was afraid of hurting the tree of immortality. It struck everywhere with the jade pestle, but it was afraid of injuring the tree of immortality, so it failed to hit the logger. Zhou Wen was somewhat afraid when he saw Jade Rabbit's irritable look. He didn't want it to snap the tree of immortality later. Zhou Wen knew that if he continued hesitating, the tree of immortality might really be chopped down by the logger. Without any hesitation, he threw an elixir of immortality at the dark gold toad that Chang he had transformed into. After Chang, he swallowed the elixir of immortality. A large amount of cold air surged out of her body, causing her body to quickly vanish as she returned to her terror state. Following that, Zhou Wen saw an extremely terrifying scene. The cold air that filled the sky surged towards the tree of immortality like a tsunami. Everything that encountered the cold air would immediately freeze. As for the tree of immortality, it became even more spirited in the cold air. The logger's flames were suppressed by the cold air when they encountered it. The range of the flames shrank. From the looks of it, Chang Yi's power was indeed his nemesis. Zhou Wen couldn't see the logger or Chang Yi, but he could tell that Chang Yi, who had eaten the elixir of immortality, had the upper hand from the cold air and flames. Zhou Wen also called Jade Rabbit back, afraid that it would accidentally injure the tree of immortality. The range of the flames shrank until there was only a small area left. The logger also appeared again as though he had escaped his terror state. Logically speaking, the logger should have lost since he couldn't even maintain his terror state. However, for some reason, Zhou Wen felt his heart palpitate when he saw Wei Ji's face. He had a nagging feeling that something was about to happen. The infinite cold air had already surged towards the logger, extinguishing a portion of the flames around him. It was about to freeze the logger in the cold air. Facing the endless frost aura, the logger suddenly revealed a strange smile. In the next second, the overwhelming frost aura completely drowned the logger's body. Apart from the frost aura, there was no other power. Not even a tiny flame could be seen. The toad reappeared. Its entire body was covered in frost, like an ice sculpture. Even when it wasn't in its terror mode, it was still emitting a terrifying chill. From this, it could be seen how powerful the immortal medicine was. Even now, the medicinal effect was still erupting. What a pity. I might become a toad after eating the elixir of immortality. I don't want to become a second Chang. Zhou Wen looked at Chang Yi and saw that she was staring at the logger. Zhou Wen looked over and saw that after the frost dissipated, the logger's body appeared. He had already turned into an ice sculpture and was completely frozen. However, Zhou Wen felt that something was amiss when he saw Wei Ji's expression. There was clearly a smile on his lips that made one's hair stand on end. "Kacha, Kacha! A tiny cracking sound sounded. It could only be heard with Truth Listener, making Zhou feel that something was amiss. What was even more shocking was that inside the ice sculpture, the logger's body gradually turned into an ice jade state. Not only did the cold air fail to injure him, but it also made his strength stronger. How is this possible? He clearly has a fire elemental power, and it's a fire elemental power that has already undergone terror transformation. How can he suddenly switch to a frost elemental power? Ice Maiden was alarmed as she stared at the logger in disbelief. The toad also wore a solemn expression and was somewhat puzzled. Clearly, it couldn't figure out why the logger's power had turned into a frost elemental power. Not good. Moon Goddess's voice entered Zhou Wen's ears. Almost at the same time, the ice on the logger's body completely shattered as he regained his freedom. At that moment, the logger's body suffused a terrifying cold aura. It didn't look any weaker than the cold aura on the toad's body. I never expected that I would have to use the power of this human body to salvage the situation. The logger raised his arm and looked at his palm. Although this body is very weak, his life soul is surprisingly interesting. It has the effect of reversing yin and yang. Even I benefited a lot from it. I really have to thank him. Oh no, the elixir of immortality is refined from the yin elemental tree of immortality. It can boost Chang Yi's yin elemental power. It's very effective against fire elemental powers, but now that the logger has switched to a frost elemental power, Chang Yi's power suppression ability on him has been greatly weakened. It's no longer possible to kill or suppress him. Once the effects of the elixir of immortality fade, no one can stop the logger. From the looks of it, the moon really won't be able to escape this calamity, Moon Goddess sighed. Is there no other way? Zhou asked with a frown. Although he still had 2 elixirs of immortality, they weren't the key to victory. It was useless even if he was willing to give them to Chang Yi. As you can see, Jade Rabbit's strength is too ferocious. If it stops the logger, I'm afraid the tree of immortality will be destroyed by it first. That ice demon from the dimension has only just entered the terror grade. It's too weak, so it's impossible for it to stop the logger. Moon Goddess sighed softly and said, "The moon's calamity is inevitable. I wonder where my Moon Goddess temple will be exposed in the future." Chang Yi transformed into her terror form again and charged at the logger. The logger clenched his palm, and the power of frost condensed in his palm, transforming into an ice axe. Then it vanished, transforming into a dazzling ice beam. Kacha! Crack! Zhou Wen couldn't see the battle between the 2 terror creatures, but the tree of immortality was slashed by the ice beam. The wounds grew larger and larger. As the tree of immortality was injured, the entire moon began to tremble. Deep ravines appeared on the moon's surface, and they kept spreading. It looked like the end of the world was really coming. Is the moon really going to be destroyed? Zhou Wen was alarmed. Leave. From now on, I'm afraid the moon will no longer exist. Moon Goddess's voice sounded. Shen Yuqi and Wang Chun, who had been frozen in front of the Moon Goddess temple, had also recovered. However, they had no idea what was going on. They looked at the quaking and cracking ground with eyes filled with horror. If Earth is really like the moon and is a companion egg, if those fellows from the dimension really find a way to make it appear, then humanity. Zhou Wen looked at the moon that was on the verge of destruction and could already imagine what Earth would look like when the time came. The ground would crack, volcanoes would erupt, and seawater would drown everything. All humans would have nowhere to hide. 99% of the billions of humans would die in a short period of time. Perhaps a few people could use external forces to escape Earth, but there were too few of them. Chapter 1072. Now that the moon is destroyed, I can still escape back to Earth. If Earth is destroyed in the future, where can I escape to? Zhou Wen looked at the tree of immortality that was beginning to tilt with a heavy expression. The legendary tree of immortality had the ability to recover on its own, but under the logger's power, the wounds on the tree of immortality didn't automatically heal. They were constantly expanding. Let's go. If the undying tree falls, it'll be too late. The moon goddess voice came from the moon goddess temple. Shun Yuqi and Wang Chuyuan turned around and ran in the direction of the spacecraft. As the moon had split open, many cracks had appeared on Toad Palace and the outer layer of the moon. There was no need to leave through the door. However, Zhou didn't move. He looked at the tree of immortality and asked, "You are moon goddess, the ruler of the moon. With such immense power, why can't you stop him?" The moon goddess sighed and said, "It's because I'm a creature born on the moon. The logger can ignore the rules of the moon, but I can't violate them. Now that I think about it, it's quite ironic. As a creature of the moon, it can only break free from its shackles and use its powers freely after the moon shatters. Then, if you were to choose, would you want to protect the moon or have freedom and strength?" Zhou asked. "I've lived here for countless years, and I can't be bothered to move anymore." The moon goddess smiled bitterly. "Now, it seems that even if I don't want to move, there's nothing I can do. Then let's give it a try and see if we can save the moon." As Zhou spoke, he took out a calabash and released the Seven Seas Dragon King. At the same time, he released Grim Demon from the demonic sword. "Grim Demon, no matter what, protect that tree," Zhou said as he pointed at the distant tree of immortality. "I only have one method. That's to kill." Grim Demon's eyes were filled with intense killing intent as he transformed into demonic aura that swept towards the tree of immortality. Grim Demon. So Grim Demon is Zhou Wen's guardian. The escaping Shin Yuqi's heart couldn't help but race when he saw Grim Demon appear. Grim Demon became famous in one battle. He defeated the challenger in a crushing manner. Humans were guessing who he belonged to. He never expected Grim Demon to be Zhou Wen's guardian. It's actually his. In that case, those mythical companion beasts are also Zhou Wen's. They don't belong to a particular family? Many thoughts flashed through Shun Yuqi's mind as he looked at the distant Zhou Wen with a complicated expression. He gritted his teeth and quickly fled. The moon goddess was also a little surprised, but her surprise was completely different from Shun Yuqi's. It wasn't rare to have a guardian. It was normal for a human like Zhou Wen to be fancied by a guardian. However, the guardian didn't come from Zhou Wen's body, but from a sword of his companion beast. Moon Goddess had never heard of a guardian that attached itself to a companion beast. Furthermore, it was a Terrorgrade guardian. This was even more surprising. Grim Demon rushed over and fought the logger crazily. Instead, Toad Will became a supporting character that supported Grim Demon. Unlike the Toad, Grim Demon didn't consider stopping the logger at all. He only wanted to kill his opponent. Attack a crazy attack. Zhou could clearly tell that the logger no longer had the energy to chop down trees. After receiving Zhou Wen's order, the Seven Seas Dragon King also moved. However, it didn't participate in the battle. Instead, it charged at the Tree of Immortality and sprayed the glue-like liquid at its wound. As the logger's power was special, it seemed to have a restraining effect on the Tree of Immortality, making it difficult for the Tree of Immortality's wounds to automatically heal. Zhou Wen didn't have such a powerful companion beast that could heal the Tree of Immortality's wounds in a short period of time. Therefore, he got the Seven Seas Dragon King to use glue to block the wound. Even if the logger escaped Grim Demon and the Toad, if he wanted to chop down the tree again, he would either have to destroy the glue or change locations. Regardless of which choice it was, it could buy the Tree of Immortality a lot of time. Of course, Zhou Wen didn't believe that the glue could really block the logger. This was because the Seven Seas Dragon King's ability was actually restrained by Ice Elemental and Fire Elemental powers. This was also why Zhou Wen didn't let the Seven Seas Dragon King directly participate in the battle. It was restrained by the logger, so it was of little use in the battle. Grim Demon had already become the main force fighting the logger. As for Chang Yi, the effects of the medicine were gradually decreasing, so the role she could play was decreasing. Jade Rabbit also wanted to help, but its body was too big. With one strike, it nearly sent Grim Demon flying. In addition, it attacked the logger together. Not only did it fail to gain the upper hand, but it also nearly injured Grim Demon a few times. Joan had no choice but to call it back. Jade Rabbit squatted by the side with an aggrieved expression, as though she knew that she had done something wrong. Joan didn't have the ability to participate in the battle. All he could do was pick up some fallen petals and put them away. They might be useful in the future. Bam! With a loud bang, the toad was sent flying and slammed into the trunk of the tree of immortality. It spat out large amounts of blood from the crisscrossing axes on its body and its inability to enter its terror form. It probably didn't have the ability to continue fighting. On the other hand, Grim Demon was unexpectedly resilient. Even when fighting the logger alone, he wasn't at a disadvantage. What Grim Demon said in the past might really not have been bragging. This combat strength is indeed off the charts. Joan thought to himself, if he's really as powerful as he says, but he's so lowly in front of Little Neonate, then what's Little Neonate's background? Demonic Neonate had too many secrets. Before she was absorbed by the Dead Man Tree, Joan couldn't even tell if she was a dimensional creature or a human. She was a very unique existence. Just as Joan was pondering over it, he saw the battle change again. Without Chong, participating in the battle, the logger switched his attributes to fire. Terrifying flames spewed out, transforming into a sea of fire. The sea of fire enveloped a large area around the tree of immortality. The leaves and petals of the tree of immortality, as well as the trunk, immediately burned when they came into contact with the flames. Grim Demon's combat strength was powerful, but he wasn't good at protection. He only wanted to kill the logger before the tree of immortality was burned. However, the logger's strength was equally unfathomable. Grim Demon failed to gain the upper hand. Seeing the tree of immortality burn, the moon's tremors intensified. Joan was momentarily at a loss as to how to resolve his current predicament. Just as Joan was hesitating about whether he should use the Ice Dragon King's tooth to see if he could extinguish the flames on the Tree of Immortality, he suddenly felt a strange power and will come to him. Banana Fairy's evolution is complete. Joan was overjoyed when he sensed the will. Chapter 1073. Joan was near the Moon Goddess Temple. With the Moon Goddess around, the logger didn't dare enter this area. However, the Tree of Immortality was being burned by the flames. If he didn't save it, it would probably be burned to a crisp in a few hours. Huge cracks constantly appeared on the surface of the moon. This was clearly a sign that the companion beast inside was about to appear. Joan didn't have the time to see what changes had happened to Banana Fairy's stats as he summoned her. With a flash of light, a young woman dressed in a white veil sat on a banana leaf that resembled a boat. Her snow-white feet were swaying playfully. She had delicate features, but her figure was exquisite. As the banana leaf floated in the air, she looked like a fairy that had descended into the world. "Little fairy, can you help me extinguish the flames on that tree?" Joan asked as he pointed at the flames on the Tree of Immortality. Banana Fairy blinked and looked in the direction of the Tree of Immortality. Then, her red lips parted slightly as she exhaled a gust of wind. Joan was filled with anticipation. Banana Fairy's Grandine Wind was known as the best wind in the three realms. Furthermore, it was attributed. It should have an extremely strong restraining effect on flames. With the help of the Grandine Wind, he might have a chance of defeating the logger. The cool breeze silently permeated the night. The wind that blew out of Banana Fairy's mouth was just too weak. "Xiao Xian Xian, blow harder." Joan was somewhat anxious. After all, the other party was a top existence at the Terrorgrade. He didn't know if such a casual blow would be effective. However, in the next second, Joan's mouth gaped open. The cool breeze that looked like a breeze immediately extinguished the terrifying flames and demonic aura when it came into contact with the terrifying flames and demonic aura. As for the demonic aura, it was also blown away. In an instant, the demonic aura that filled the sky vanished without a trace. The terrifying fire was also extinguished. Not even a wisp of smoke was left, as though the fire had never existed. Bam! Bam! Grim Demon and the logger slammed into the trunk of the tree of immortality, but they didn't fall. Their limbs were spread out as they stuck to the tree trunk, unable to move in the wind. The muscles on their faces distorted from the wind as frost formed on their eyebrows and hair. If not for the tree of immortality blocking them, they would have been blown into space. Zhou was tongue-tied and speechless. After a long while, he cried out, "Damn, this is a little too strong." Only when the breeze passed did Grim Demon and the logger fall from the tree trunk. They failed to get up immediately. Extreme wind. The moon god's voice was a little strange. She was goddess lunar, so she was naturally no stranger to the great wind. She immediately recognized it. However, she found it unbelievable that a companion beast could use the grand wind. Furthermore, it belonged to Zhou. The logger changed his element again. He turned from fire to ice and condensed an ice axe that he threw at Banana Fairy. The frost axe disappeared in midair, leaving only a swirl of icy energy. Banana Fairy sat on the banana leaf without dodging. She pouted her red lips and blew out another mouthful of fragrant wind. However, the wind this time was not as cool as before. Instead, it carried a kind of scorching heat. When the fragrant wind encountered the power of the ice axe, blazing white flames appeared out of thin air. Instantly, the ice axe completely melted. It went from ice to water, then from water to steam, and finally turned into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The gale swept over with the flames and devoured the logger's body. It instantly melted the ice aura on his body, and his body immediately burned. We're on the same side. We're on the same side. Another tragic cry sounded. It was Grim Demon, who had just gotten up and was standing not far from the logger, who was affected. The demonic aura on his body ignited as he instantly turned into a flaming man. Banana Fairy's wind was good in every way, but it was too wide-ranging. It didn't differentiate between friend and foe, implicating Grim Demon. Extreme Yang wind. Moon God was even more alarmed. Supreme Yin and Supreme Yang were two opposing attributes. They were two extremes. A companion beast actually had the ability to control Supreme Yin wind and Supreme Yang wind at the same time. This was just too terrifying. If she can advance to calamity, Moon God didn't dare imagine such a scene. With a single breath, even Earth would probably become the end of the world, much less the moon. Ahem, little fairy, that's on the same side. Zhou hurriedly helped Grim Demon out of the predicament. It was unknown what kind of fire Banana Fairy's flames were, but Grim Demon failed to extinguish the flames on his body. He cried out from the burning. Banana Fairy blew another gust of wind. This time, it was the Supreme Yin wind. As the breeze blew, the flames on Grim Demon's body were immediately extinguished. The logger had just switched to the fire attribute and wanted to absorb the flames on his body when the grand Yin wind instantly extinguished the flames on his body. Then he saw Grim Demon and the logger fly out together. Bam! They slammed into the tree of immortality again and stuck their limbs to the tree trunk. After the grand Yin wind blew past, they fell again. Grim Demon didn't dare continue staying here. He could tell that this companion beast of unknown origins was a destroyer who didn't differentiate between friend and foe. It was even more reckless than Grim Demon. If he stayed any longer, he might be killed. After the logger fell, he struggled to get up, but he suddenly held his chest. His chest seemed to have been pierced by an invisible sword. Blood flowed down the invisible sword hilt and constantly dripped to the ground. The logger wanted to pull out the demonic sword, but he felt his strength rapidly disappear. He knew that he no longer had a chance to fight. After waiting for so many years, I never thought that this would be the result. The logger sat under the tree of immortality and looked up at the osmanthus petals that filled the sky. However, there wasn't much anger or hatred on his face. He extended his hand and caught a petal. He held it in his palm and stared at it, but his eyes weren't focused on the petal. It was as though his mind had flown elsewhere. Back then, I was focused on a mortal cultivation in a futile attempt to escape my mortal body, but I neglected the most important person. This can be considered my retribution. Sorry to make you wait so long. I'll be accompanying you soon." As the logger spoke, he slowly raised his head and his gaze landed on the distant Joan. "Don't tell me he wants to self-destruct and drag me down with him?" Joan subconsciously took a few steps back. To his surprise, the logger said, "Do you have anyone you want to protect?" "If not, I wouldn't have stopped you," Joan said. "That's good. Be careful of those fellows from the dimension. Don't believe their so-called rules." The logger nodded before closing his eyes. "Unfortunately, I won't be able to see the day you chop down the tree of immortality." Chapter 1074. "What do you mean?" Just as Joan was about to ask, he saw that the logger's vitality had been severed. There were no more vital fluctuations. From the looks of it, he was dead. "Why don't you make yourself clear before you die?" Joan was somewhat depressed, but from the looks of it, the logger didn't seem to have any intention of saying anything else. Otherwise, he would have said it before he died. However, it wasn't easy to guess what the logger meant with that sentence. There were many explanations for this sentence. Perhaps Joan couldn't resist the temptation and wanted to obtain the companion beasts on the moon, so he had come to chop down the tree of immortality. It was also possible that there was a secret under the tree of immortality. In the future, Joan had to chop down the tree of immortality to know the secret. There were too many possibilities. It was also possible that the logger had said it casually to arouse Joan's curiosity. Joan wasn't in the mood to continue guessing. At least from the looks of it, it was better for the moon to exist than to be destroyed. As he walked towards the logger, Joan planned on bringing his corpse back. After all, this body belonged to Wei Gu. At the very least, he had to return his body to his family in one piece. When he walked in front of the corpse, Joan reached out his hands and placed them under the corpse's armpits. Just as he was about to lift the corpse, he suddenly saw the corpse open its eyes. Joan's reaction was extremely fast, as he instantly made a decision. If he retreated, he would fall into the logger's trap, so Joan did the opposite. Instead of retreating, he advanced and pressed his body against the logger's body. His hands passed under his armpits before grabbing his neck. He wanted to use force to snap his neck. It's me. Don't. Cough, cough." The logger said a few words before a powerful force pressed down on his neck, preventing him from saying a word. When Joan heard those words, he couldn't help but slow down and stop exerting strength. This was because the tone of those words didn't sound like the logger's, but Wei Ji's. "President Wei?" Joan released his hand and retreated as he looked at Wei Gu suspiciously. If it was a logger, he would have already killed him, but it didn't seem possible for it to be Wei Gu. Be it Wei Ji's consciousness controlling his body or the logger's consciousness controlling his body, the injuries suffered by this body were fatal. It was useless no matter whose consciousness came. If the body died, the consciousness could only perish. The wound on Wei Ji's chest was still there. His heart had been pierced. How could Wei Gu still be alive when the logger was dead? "It's me." Wei Gu looked down at the wound on his chest and gritted his teeth. "I don't have much time left. Quickly think of a way to save me. First, think of a way to stabilize my injuries. Just don't let me die. Are you really guild leader Wei?" Joan looked at Wei Gu suspiciously. He suspected that the logger wasn't dead and was trying to trick Zhou into treating him. "Do you still remember when I went to look for you after graduation? We even chatted. Do you still remember how I won by half a step?" Wei Gu asked. The logger has occupied the body and might have absorbed the memories, Zhou said as he looked at Wei Gu warily. Wei Gu was at a loss whether to laugh or cry. "My college brother Zhou. I'm really Wei Gu. Previously, I recognized that the bone pottery was an offering used to invite the gods. I knew that I might be possessed by some spirit body creature, and I also knew that Shun Yuqi would most likely use me as a sacrifice. Therefore, I might as well take the initiative to take the bone pottery. As my life providence is to live from the extremity of death, it's too troublesome to explain. To put it simply, after my body dies, I can still exist in a zombie state for a period of time. If my body is treated during this period of time, I can still live. I really can't hold on any longer. If you don't treat my injuries, I'll really die, Wei Gu said gloomily. Zhou saw that his tone and demeanor were indeed different from the logger's, so he believed him a little. This was because Zhou had previously determined that Wei Gu might know the origins of the bone pottery, which was why he had taken the initiative to take it. He definitely had some tricks up his sleeve. Previously, Zhou had imagined that Wei Gu had made a mistake in judgment, resulting in his tragic death. Now, from the looks of it, this was his trick. Without much hesitation, Zhou switched to the primordial human sovereign life soul and threw a punch at Wei Ji's wound. The fist punched straight into Wei Ji's heart, but when it was pulled out, the wound on his heart recovered greatly. Punch after punch bombarded Wei Gu. Under the strange power, the fatal blow on Wei Ji's heart magically healed completely. There were no more wounds on his chest. However, due to the excessive blood loss, Wei Ji's body still couldn't maintain it. Zhou summoned a few pill essences like the rejuvenation pill and made Wei Gu swallow them. Only then did his body recover its vitality. The spiritual light in Wei Ji's eyes became stronger and stronger. Soon, he was like a normal person. Zhou, I have to thank you this time. Otherwise, I would have really died here, Wei Gu said as he stood up. If the logger hadn't died, would you have been able to reclaim your body? Zhou asked Wei Gu. No. Wei Gu shook his head. If I can't treat your injuries, can you still live? Zhou asked again. No. Wei Gu shook his head again. Then why are you still betting? Zhou felt that the conditions were too harsh. If he wasn't here, Wei Gu would have no chance of survival. Because there are hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of times more benefits. It's worth taking the risk. The logger used my body and died in it. The wealth he left behind for this body is immeasurable. It's worth me risking my life. Wei Gu smiled and continued. Of course, there's another important reason why I'm willing to bet. What is it? Zhou asked. Because you're here, Wei Gu said seriously. You think too highly of me. Zhou shook his head and smiled bitterly. While Zhou and company were on the moon, the ranking battle on Earth continued. He constantly faced the challenges of different guardians, but he still hadn't been defeated. However, Ye's various abilities were constantly being understood by the guardians. Furthermore, the opponents that appeared were getting stronger and stronger. It was becoming more and more difficult for him to win, but he still hadn't lost. In Forbidden City, which was enveloped in fog, a distorted figure of light descended from the void. The figure of light was very similar to the figure of light that had changed the cube's battle rules twice. Or rather, it was the same creature. The figure of light floated in front of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. The door to the Hall of Supreme Harmony seemed to be controlled by some invisible force as it automatically opened. In the hall, there was a log lying flat. Purple Micro, why haven't you chosen your contractor yet? An ethereal voice sounded from the figure of light. That's my problem. What has it got to do with you? A cold woman's voice sounded from a log. Chapter 1075. As a guardian, you should know your mission, the figure said as he looked down at the log in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. My mission has long ended. Don't you already have a new guardian? Why are you still looking for me? The woman in the log snorted coldly. The new guardian has only been born for a short period of time. He hasn't grown strong enough to fight for first place, the figure said. What has that got to do with me? The woman's voice was cold and heartless. Defeat ya, and you can return to the dimension and obtain a sufficient status, the figure said. The woman suddenly laughed, her laughter filled with mockery. Aren't you known to be omnipotent high-level life forms? Can't you even deal with a fellow who's half human and half guardian? After you return to the dimension, you can dominate an area. There was no emotional change in the figure's voice. Not interested, the woman said without hesitation. One divine fruit, the figure continued. Keep it for yourself, the woman mocked. 10. The figure remained emotionless. Are you that afraid that you will get first place? The woman didn't reject it immediately. He's not a guardian. There's already Wang Mingyuan. There's no need for second or third. The Lord of Earth has to be a guardian, the figure said. Even the half-human king of Earth isn't allowed to appear? How ironic. Humans are the original owners of Earth, right? What do you want before you take action? The figure asked. I haven't found a suitable contractor, so I don't plan on taking action. The woman rejected the figure again. You aren't the only guardian who survived that era. If they obtain 10 divine fruits, you should know what it means. There was finally some emotion in the figure's voice. One could clearly sense that his tone had turned colder. So what if I know? The woman said indifferently. As long as you defeat an ordinary mythical, you can obtain 10 divine fruits. Such a good thing will never happen a second time. Don't regret it. The figure calmed down. There's nothing that can make me, Empress Ziwei, regret it, the woman said. The figure didn't say anything else as it gradually disappeared into the void. Finally, it completely vanished. Empress Ziwei, who was in the log, muttered to herself after sensing that the light and shadow had disappeared. An ordinary mythical creature? I'm afraid it's not that simple. Otherwise, why would you come to me? On the moon, Zhou was sitting in front of a huge cube. After saving Wei Ge, Zhou originally planned on finding trouble with Shen Yuqi, but Wei Ge convinced him. In fact, Wei Ge didn't say much. He only told Zhou, leave him alive. With me around, the Bureau will be your eyes and ears in the future. With Wei Ji's words, Zhou didn't seek trouble with Shen Yuqi. He only got the great Might Vidrabul to send Wei Ge back to the spacecraft while he stayed on the moon. Zhou had originally planned on using Glimmer to teleport back, so he didn't need to take the spacecraft back. Therefore, he got Wei Ge to return with him. As for how Wei Ge would subdue Shen Yuqi in the Bureau, Zhou didn't wish to know. Even if Wei Ge didn't succeed, Zhou already had the absolute strength to destroy the Bureau at any time. However, before returning to Earth, Zhou wanted to obtain more petals from the Tree of Immortality. However, the Moon God told him that the Tree of Immortality's vitality was greatly injured, so it was best not to pluck its petals and wait for it to recover. Zhou had no choice but to pick up the petals that had fallen nearby. He didn't touch the petals on the tree. He knew the principle of a steady stream flowing over time. After strolling around the moon, he realized that there was a cube here. Zhou had already seen several battles here, all of them between Ye and the Guardian. A battle at this level can't even withstand a single breath from my little fairy. Every time Zhou secretly compared them, he felt that Banana Fairy was much stronger. There was no comparison between a typical mythical and a Terrorgrade. Banana Fairy, Terrorgrade, Evolvable, Life Providence, Yin Yang Spirit Root Life Soul, Wind Immortal Wheel of Destiny, 3 Realms Best Wind Terraform, Indefinite True Immortal, S-Grade Strength, 82 Speed, 82 Constitution, 82 Essence Energy, 82 Talent Skill, Supreme Yin Wind, Supreme Yang Wind, Immeasurable Wind Companion Form. Fan Banana Fairy's evolution was very strange. This was because ordinary creatures' evolution wouldn't change their life providence and life soul. However, Banana Fairy's evolution had even changed her life soul and life providence. This was something Zhou had never seen before. Furthermore, it was different from Demonic Neonate. Demonic Neonate was still at the mythical stage, but she had the ability to transform into a Terraform. Zhou originally believed that the Terrorgrade was only a state at the mythical stage. However, from the looks of it, the Terrorgrade was indeed above the mythical stage, and it wasn't just a state. Banana Fairy was the true Terrorgrade. Demonic Neonate hadn't truly reached the Terrorgrade, but for some reason, she had the ability to transform into a Terraform. Zhou guessed that it had something to do with her Wheel of Destiny, but he couldn't be sure. Then, there was Banana Fairy's stats. Although she had broken through the mythical limit of 81 points, it wasn't like before where she directly reached a certain value. All her stats had only increased by 1 point. Zhou suspected that after the Terrorgrade, Banana Fairy might need to slowly raise her stats like humans. As for what the limit of the Terrorgrade was, Zhou wasn't sure. According to previous standards, the limit should be double the previous level, but this was only a guess. As for how strong Banana Fairy's terror transformation ability was, Zhou had no idea. This was because once Banana Fairy completely transformed into a terror form, even Zhou, as her master, couldn't see her. The only thing he was sure of was that Banana Fairy was very strong. As he was pondering over it, he saw the cube light up again. Another guardian had challenged you. However, the name that challenged you this time made Zhou's pupils involuntarily constrict. Ninth Arch. He finally joined the battle. Zhou was somewhat worried. Zhongzia might not know that Ninth Arch was at the terror grade. If Zhongzia was trapped in Ninth Thearka's Evernight domain without knowing it, he might not even have the chance to surrender before being killed. After all, only the terror grade could defeat the terror grade. Zhongzia and Primordial Sword Immortal hadn't reached the terror grade. Zhongzia quickly accepted the challenge, making Zhou even more worried. It looked like Zhongzia didn't know of Ninth Thearka's existence. Ninth Arch entered the cube's arena and stood in midair as he stared at Zhongzia. I don't want to kill you, so admit defeat yourself. Zhongzia looked up at Ninth Arch. No one could see his expression behind the mask, but Zhongzia's words made Zhou heave a sigh of relief. I want to know how strong the terror grade is. Zhongzia slowly pulled out Primordial Immortal Sword. Chapter 1076. To me, you are a work of art. Don't give me the chance to destroy you with my own hands, Ninth Arch said. Compared to being a work of art, I want to be a tool without any beauty, Zhongzia said. Since you insist on fighting, attack, Ninth Arch said calmly. That's exactly what I had in mind, Zhongzia said as he became one with his sword and transformed into a stream of light that streaked towards Ninth Arch. Zhongzia's sword techniques and movement techniques were already at the mythical stage. They weren't inferior to Zhou's. In fact, due to the augmentation of his mythical stats, he was even stronger than Zhou. However, no matter how terrifying the Primordial Immortal Sword in his hand was, it couldn't harm a corner of Ninth Thearka's clothes. Ninth Arch was like a ghost, his figure erratic. Zhongzia's sword was always 3 inches away from him, preventing him from stabbing him. It's really perfect. You are better than I imagined, Ninth Arch praised as he dodged Zhongzia's sword. Others might think that Ninth Arch was mocking Zhongzia, but Zhou knew that Ninth Arch didn't have any intention of mocking him. Those words were most likely sincere. Ninth Arch was just too strange. He could kill millions of people without any guilt. He could be said to be a true devil. However, he was especially indulgent towards those humans with excellent talent. Even though Zhou had made an enemy of him and almost killed Ninth Arch didn't take any revenge. Zhou couldn't completely understand his mentality. He only felt that he was a strange person that he couldn't figure out. Your sword is very determined. That's very good, but it's still not good enough, Ninth Arch continued. What's not good enough? Zhongzia's sword streaked across Ninth Thearka's face, just short of hitting him, but it ultimately failed to touch him. You're not focused enough. Ninth Arch flashed past Zhongzia like a ghost. My sword has no distracting thoughts. The Primordial Immortal Sword in Zhongzia's hand spun and stabbed in a direction, but it wasn't where Ninth Arch was. In the next second, space changed strangely. Their positions seemed to have been switched. Zhongzia's sword, which seemed to have stabbed into thin air, happened to stab in front of Ninth Arch. Having no distracting thoughts doesn't mean that I'm focused. Yidi's body was like the dawn of the night, quietly retreating. That strange sword kept advancing in front of the tip of his nose, but it was like the light of dawn couldn't touch the curtain of night. It was forever a distance away from Yidi. Ninth Arch said as he fought, "Your sword is too emotional and can't be focused. If you want to use the sword, you have to be extremely emotional with it. If you want to kill, you have to devote all your attention to the process of killing. You have too many emotions in your heart, so it's inevitable that you'll be distracted. That's why you can't focus. I don't believe that there is anyone in this world who can achieve absolute focus." Zhongzia continued to attack. His sword techniques were ever-changing. One after another, the doppelgangers charged at Night the Arch from all directions, but Night the Arch dodged them again and again. There really isn't, but I've seen someone who's very close to it. He's more ruthless than you and more focused than you. However, you're not bad either. If you can turn your emotions into extreme emotions, you might be able to surpass him, Yi Di said. I think I know who you're talking about. He's indeed very strong. Zhong Zia threw out the sword in his hand. Primordial immortal sword split into thousands of avatars in the air and bombarded Night the Arch like a storm. However, Night the Arch stood there without moving. He allowed the thousands of ancient swords to pass through his body, but none of them could injure him. He didn't transform into his terror form. The swords didn't injure him, not because of the power of his terror form, but because the swords were only illusions and not real. He also has his flaws. Compared to you, he's too conservative and can't accept new powers. This is a very fatal flaw. Therefore, in comparison, I think more highly of you. You have a chance to improve further. Night the Arch suddenly attacked. His fingers clamped onto the real primordial immortal sword amidst the thousands of primordial immortal sword illusions. The primordial immortal sword trembled in his fingers, but it couldn't move at all. Go! Your time hasn't arrived. I'm looking forward to the arrival of that era. Night the Arch casually flung his hand, and primordial immortal sword flew back into the scabbard in Zhong Zia's other hand. This moment of battle dazzled everyone. Everyone was alarmed by Night the Arch's strength. Yeah, who had been undefeated and almost invincible, seemed to be easily suppressed in front of Night the Arch. Time never arrives without waiting. Zhong Zia didn't have any intention of retreating. I didn't want to kill you previously, and I don't want now, but you have to leave this place, Night the Arch said with a frown. Before I get first place, I won't die, nor will I leave, Zhong Zia said firmly. Is there something more important than death? Night the Arch asked. Yes, Zhong Zia answered firmly. Then let me see if you have a right to stay. As Night the Arch spoke, he took a step forward. At that instant, the entire arena transformed into eternal night. The cube screen was pitch black. Nothing could be seen, and only the sound of armor tearing could be heard. In the blink of an eye, the arena lit up again. Night the Arch had already returned to his original spot, and so was Ya. However, his cloak and armor had many cracks on his body. Blood kept flowing out, dyeing his armor red. Go back, Night the Arch said. Thank you, Zhong Zia suddenly said. Before Night the Arch could figure out what Zhong Zia meant by thanking him, he saw that what flowed out of Zhong Zia's wounds was no longer blood but light. The light was corroding his body, gradually turning his flesh and blood into light. Terror transformation. Night the Arch looked at Zhong Zia in surprise. Clearly, Zhong Zia was transforming towards the terror grade. Kill him. A voice sounded in Night the Arch's mind. Night the Arch looked at Zhong Zia, who was in his terror transformation, and knew that this was a critical moment for his advancement. Now was the best opportunity to kill him. Once he completed his terror transformation, it wouldn't be that easy to kill him. However, Night the Arch only stood there and watched without any intention of attacking. I said kill him. Didn't you hear me? The voice sounded in Night the Arch's mind again. Night the Arch remained unmoved as though he hadn't heard anything. Do you know the consequences of violating our agreement? The voice was already somewhat angry. Night the Arch, never care about the consequences, Night the Arch said indifferently. In the dimensional world, a distorted figure of light roared angrily. Terrifying strength crushed everything nearby to dust, but was still unable to vent the anger in his heart. Chapter 1077. Before long, Ya's body completely transformed into light. On the cube screen, all one could see was a humanoid figure. With a slight movement, a dazzling light would change. His appearance couldn't be seen at all. Instead, primordial immortal sword maintained its original appearance in Ya's hand because it hadn't reached the terror grade. The guardian you fused with is at the terror grade? Night Arch asked as he admired Zhong Ziya's terror transformation. Yes, Zhong Ziya answered. With your strength, it's impossible for you to fuse and absorb such a guardian. How'd you do it? Night Arch continued asking. A betting contract, Zhong Ziya answered. Others might not understand what a betting contract was, but Night Arch knew very well. When he heard that, he asked with a heavy expression, "What did you bet with him?" "First on the rankings," Zhong Ziya answered. Night Arch laughed. "Do you know how difficult this path is? It's impossible for the alien races in the universe to let even half a human become the final victor. It's only fun when there's difficulty." Zhong Ziya's sword-wielding hand emitted a bright light. The primordial immortal sword and scabbard in his hand slowly transformed into a body of light. Interesting. Then let me see if you have the qualifications to reach the end. Night Arch took a step forward, and Evernight descended on the arena again, turning everything into darkness. Humans all over the world felt terrible. It was like watching a boring, lousy movie at a cinema. After enduring it for an hour, they finally saw a beautiful woman about to take a bath, but the screen suddenly turned black. All they could hear was the sound of water splashing. It made them feel so uncomfortable that they wanted to go crazy. Zhou didn't feel good either because he couldn't see what was happening inside. However, this state didn't last long. Soon, a dot of light appeared on the dark screen. The dot of light grew brighter and brighter. Finally, like a volcanic eruption, it illuminated the dark area. In the end, the light was so bright that people couldn't look at it directly. It was so blinding that they couldn't open their eyes. When the light faded, the cube screen finally returned to normal. Yeah, and Night Thearch's figures appeared. The two of them looked at each other as though nothing had happened. Who won? I don't know. I didn't see anything. It's too terrifying. We can't even see a battle at that level. If such an expert were to slaughter humans, we wouldn't even have the chance to resist. There was a flurry of discussion as Zhou wore a puzzled look. He didn't know who had won or lost. I hope he can walk to the end. With that said, Night Arch turned around and disappeared into the night. I will, Zhong Ziya replied. The cube screen turned black before returning to the rankings. You was still ranked first. Night Arch wasn't on the rankings. It was clear that you had won again. After you won, the Guardians didn't swarm to challenge him like before. There wasn't even a single challenger. This was because the Guardians knew very well that only a Terrorgrade could defeat a Terrorgrade. If they challenged again, it wouldn't be a challenge but suicide. There's less than 40 hours left on the countdown. If this continues, you should have a high chance of obtaining first place, right? Zhou muttered to himself. It's impossible for him to get first place. A palm-sized humanoid puppet walked over, but the voice that the puppet made belonged to the moon god. Why not? He's already at the Terrorgrade. Even if he encounters other Terrorgrades, he should have a certain chance of winning, right? Zhou didn't know why the moon god was so sure that Zhong Ziya wouldn't get first place. Just as Night Arch said, it's impossible for the dimension to let a half-human obtain first place, the moon god answered. Zhou pondered for a moment and said, if humans obtain first place, it means that no dimensional race can obtain control of Earth for a year. I can understand that. However, you can only be considered half-human. If he wins, doesn't it mean that the Guardian race that has fused with you has won? Why can't it be accepted? Those who aren't of our race definitely have different intentions. It's the same for dimensional creatures. If you find the strongest companion beast in this year, do you think you will hand it over to a dimensional creature? The moon god paused for a moment before continuing. Most importantly, that dimensional wheel can't be handed over to a creature with a human bloodline. Otherwise, even if those dimensional experts descend personally, it's impossible for them to defeat humans with dimensional wheels in this world. The dimensional wheel was created by dimensional creatures. Could it be that even they can't deal with the dimensional wheel themselves? Zhou, when asked in puzzlement, who told you that the dimensional wheel was created by dimensional creatures? The moon god asked. Isn't it? Zhou was slightly taken aback. Of course not. The so-called dimensional wheel is actually a companion beast, the moon god said. Companion beast? What level is it? Zhouwen was somewhat puzzled. It's hard to say what level it is, but the owner of that companion beast is a companion beast owned by the strongest guardian in that terrifying era. In that era, they fought countless powerful opponents in the world and finally obtained first place. That dimensional wheel played an immeasurable role. The moon god paused for a moment before continuing. You have to know that in that era, guardians weren't as weak as they are now. This was because the battle of guardians back then lasted a long time. All guardians had enough time to become stronger. Furthermore, in that era, the various races of the dimension had just reached an agreement. The supervision wasn't too strict. Many terrifying dimensional creatures descended and secretly influenced the battle of guardians. Those who could defeat all their opponents in that era and stand at the top of the world were unimaginably powerful existences. Which era is the era of terror you mentioned? Who is the guardian who obtained first place? Who's his contractor? Zhouwen was puzzled. That human's name is Xianyuan. The guardian's name is Mystic the Arch, the moon god answered. Xianyuan, could it be Yellow Emperor? Then, is Qi Yu one of his opponents? Zhouwen was alarmed as he hurriedly asked. There was indeed such a person. He was also an existence that had a high chance of obtaining first place back then. His guardian was a weapon lord. I still remember that if Xianyuan hadn't taken away the dimensional wheel, the final winner of that terrifying era might have been Qi Yu, the moon god said. What do you mean? Didn't you say that the dimensional wheel was Yellow Emperor's companion beast? Zhouwen was even more puzzled. Yes, Yellow Emperor picked up the dimensional wheel companion egg, so the dimensional wheel naturally became his companion beast. However, Qi Yu originally had a chance of obtaining the dimensional wheel companion egg. No, it should be said that the dimensional wheel should have belonged to Qi Yu and the weapon lord, the moon god said after some thought. Chapter 1078. The moon goddess was born on the moon, so she didn't know much about Earth. What she could see were the major events that happened on Earth. Only when there was a sufficiently big commotion could the moon goddess see a thing or two. Just like the ship that tore through the sky back then, the moon goddess could see such a huge matter clearly from the moon. Originally, the battle between Qi Yu and Yellow Emperor wasn't enough for the moon goddess to observe, but later, a huge meteorite hit Earth. If Earth was hit, most creatures would probably be wiped out. The moon goddess didn't know what the experts on Earth had done, but in the end, Qi Yu wore the weapon lord armor and tore through the sky to shatter the meteorite. The dimensional wheel companion egg flew out from the shattered meteorite, but Qi Yu and the weapon lord had already expended their strength when shattering the meteorite. They were picked up by another human and guardian. They were naturally Yellow Emperor and Mystic the Arch. There's actually such a thing. Zhouwen was taken aback when he heard that. He didn't know if the moon goddess was telling the truth. However, the moon goddess's knowledge was very limited. She couldn't say it clearly because there was no such thing as the Black Cube in that era. The experts fought directly on Earth. Only when the battle energy exceeded a certain level could the moon goddess observe it. The energy explosion of the dimensional wheel had been observed by the moon goddess many times. It was likely the key to Yellow Emperor's victory. That's not right. Since the dimensional wheel is Yellow Emperor's companion beast, it should have returned to dust with Yellow Emperor. Why did it fall into the hands of dimensional creatures? Zhouwen thought of a terrifying question. That's not something I can know. The puppet controlled by the moon goddess shook its head. As the two of them spoke, the black cube lit up again. Someone had issued a challenge. The person being challenged was Stylia. To dare challenge in this era, the challenger must be extraordinary. He must be at the terror grade, right? Zhouwen looked at the challenger's name. However, the name was unfamiliar. It was a guardian named Cave Era. Before long, Zhongzia accepted the challenge and appeared in the cube's arena again. Zhouwen carefully sized up the Cave Era that had entered the arena. He saw a human in gray armor. The armor wrapped around her entire body, and he could only tell that she was a woman. However, he had no idea what kind of human she was, what she looked like, or whether she was young or old. Is this the former guardian? Zhouwen asked the moon god puppet. Few guardians that had appeared in recent years could advance to the Terror grade. As long as they were at the Terror grade, they were most likely guardians that had survived in the past. I don't know. Moon Goddess's answer left Zhou when somewhat depressed. Zhongxia didn't care who his opponent was. He directly entered his terror state and transformed into a beam of light that slashed at the cave era. However, Cave Era's figure disappeared in front of everyone, as if she had become invisible. It's indeed at the Terror grade again. Zhou wasn't surprised. It would be strange if the person who dared challenge you wasn't at the Terror grade. After the cave world disappeared, the only thing that could be seen in the arena was the dazzling ya. Light and shadows could be seen constantly flashing. You should be constantly attacking. He should be able to see the cave world. Ya is in danger, the moon goddess said. What's going on? Zhou asked with a frown. He couldn't see the battle clearly. See for yourself. The moon goddess did not answer directly. If I could see it, would I be asking you? Zhou said gloomily. You'll be able to see it soon, the moon goddess said meaningfully. Indeed, it didn't take long for Zhou to realize that the light representing Yi gradually slowed down. Not only that, but even his terror form became somewhat unstable. After a while, Yi couldn't maintain his terror state and revealed himself. Furthermore, his current body looked a little off. The body under the robe looked much thinner and a little hunched. Although he couldn't see his appearance, his body didn't give off the feeling of a young and strong youth. Instead, he looked like an old man on the brink of death. The power of time. Zhou immediately knew what had happened. The power of the cave era was actually time. Zhongxia had likely been affected by a power that accelerated time. Guardians wouldn't die and weren't afraid of the rapid passage of time. However, Zhongxia wasn't a pure guardian. He was half human, so he still had a limited lifespan. He would still age. There's still a chance of survival if he admits defeat now. Otherwise, he will die of old age in the arena. Unfortunately, he has a betting contract. Admitting defeat will also result in death, the moon goddess sighed. What kind of contract is a betting contract? Zhou could roughly guess the rules of a betting contract, but he still wanted to know more details. Typical guardian contracts are equal contracts. Both parties can terminate the contract at any time without paying any price. However, a betting contract is different, especially in a situation like Yi's. His strength isn't enough to absorb and fuse with such a powerful guardian, so he can only agree to sign a betting contract with a guardian. If he can win the betting contract, he can always have this body. However, if he loses, I'm afraid this body will only benefit others in the end, the moon goddess said. Just now, he said that the betting contract is a bet on whether he can obtain first place. In other words, he has no way out now and has to win? Zhou frowned slightly. His body is already aged. I'm afraid he has no chance of winning, the moon goddess said. It shouldn't be that simple, Zhou said as he stared at Yi. He can't withstand the passage of time, nor can he touch the cave era that has the ability to accelerate time. I can't think of how he can turn the tables. The moon goddess puppet looked at Zhou and said, Do you know what other abilities he has that can help him turn the tables? I don't know what abilities he has, but a person like him shouldn't just wait for death, Zhou said after some thought. However, the scene Zhou imagined didn't appear. As time passed, Yi's body died and fell to the ground. As time passed too quickly, Yi's body had already turned to dust when he fell. Cave Era's figure appeared again. She looked at the scattered dust on the ground, but her expression suddenly changed as she immediately entered her terror state again. As for the dust that had scattered all over the ground, it gathered together again and returned to Yi's appearance. Furthermore, he didn't look old at all. You only noticed it now? It's too late, Yi said as he extended his palm. In his palm, a strange light talisman shimmered. At the spot where the cave era had vanished, the same light talisman flickered and immediately pulled the cave era's body over. The cave era uncontrollably charged towards Yi's palm. After using several powers in a row, she failed to escape Yi's strength. Even though time had slowed down, the cave era was still flying towards Yi's palm. Chapter 1079. Seeing Cave Era admit defeat and leave the cube's arena, Zhou stood up. "Are you leaving?" the moon goddess puppet asked Zhou. "I have to return eventually." Zhou was somewhat nervous. Glimmer's advancement to a perfect body was almost certain, but Zhou didn't know if Glimmer's advancement to a perfect body could allow him to advance to the mythical stage. "Aren't you going to hatch the companion beast I gave you first?" the moon goddess puppet asked again. "In the future. I'm not in the mood to do that now." Zhou tidied up his things and confirmed that he hadn't missed anything. He temporarily stored Jade Rabbit and Ice Maiden into the Chaos Bead before waving goodbye to the moon goddess. Taking a deep breath, Zhou switched to the sky-stealing, sun-shifting art and used the Glimmer Life Soul to choose Earth as the teleportation target in the Pocket Universe. His body instantly tore through the void. In the blink of an eye, Zhou realized that he had returned to Earth and was standing in a desert. Almost at the same time, the Glimmer Life Soul erupted with immense energy and rapidly transformed. The Pocket Universe in his body seemed to be activated as it began to circulate on its own. In the desert that originally looked empty, a lot of energy appeared for some baffling reason. The energy was like countless meteors that rushed from the sky to the ground. This gave Zhou a fright because the meteors looked terrifying. Even if there were 1,000,000 or 10,000 Earths, they would probably be instantly destroyed. However, in reality, that wasn't the case. When the meteors hit Earth, they passed through Earth and didn't hit it. It was so strange that it was unbelievable. On the other hand, the meteors that hit Zhou fused into his body and his pocket universe, making it stronger and stronger. Finally, the Glimmer Life Soul completed its final evolution and became a perfect body. However, Zhou didn't have the time to observe what the Glimmer Life Soul had evolved into. The lost Immortal Sutra in his body automatically circulated. Zhou was somewhat alarmed. Although the lost Immortal Sutra could automatically circulate, this was the first time the lost Immortal Sutra automatically switched back when he simulated other essence energy arts. Could it be that I'm really going to advance to the mythical stage? Zhou was filled with anticipation and unease. The Slaughterer Life Soul automatically activated as it embraced Zhou's body as though it had fused with him. Infinite essence energy surged crazily. Zhou, who was looking forward to advancing to the mythical stage, suddenly realized that another essence energy art was beginning to circulate in his body. Ancient Sovereign Sutra. Why is this happening? The Lost Immortal Sutra is still circulating without switching. Why is the Ancient Sovereign Sutra circulating at the same time? Won't there be a conflict? Zhou was alarmed, but he realized that he couldn't stop the primordial energy in his body from circulating. He didn't know what was going on, and he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. In theory, it was very dangerous for two different primordial energy arts to circulate in the same body. Now that the Lost Immortal Sutra and Ancient Sovereign Sutra were circulating crazily at the same time, Zhou's body definitely couldn't withstand the collision of primordial energy once there was a clash. The chances of him exploding to his death was 99%. Just as Zhou was feeling uneasy, the Small Perfection of Wisdom Sutra began circulating. It wasn't just the Small Perfection of Wisdom. All the essence energy arts that Zhou had cultivated began circulating. Unlike the usual switching of essence energy arts, the essence energy arts were circulating at the same time. Ancient Sovereign Sutra, Small Perfection of Wisdom, Tao Sutra, Sky Stealing, Sun Changing, First Order of Chaos, Chi Refinement Art, God Fiend Era, Demon God Bloodline Catalog. All sorts of essence energy arts circulated in Zhou's body. Zhou was alarmed and afraid. If others cultivated two essence energy arts at the same time, there was a high chance that they would die. With these 9 primordial energy arts, it was equivalent to being marked by Hades. Even Zhou didn't dare believe that he wouldn't die. However, the 9 essence energy arts circulated in Zhou's body without any conflict. This feeling was very magical. The circulation paths of the 9 essence energy arts had many conflicts to begin with, but for some reason, the 8 essence energy arts apart from the Lost Immortal Sutra felt like they were circulating in the void. The 8 essence energy arts seemed to circulate in Zhou Wen's body, but they also didn't seem to be in his body. They were closely connected to Zhou Wen's body, but they weren't completely attached to his body. It was a very magical experience. The 8 essence energy arts circulated with the support of Zhou Wen's essence energy. If not for the Lost Immortal Sutra providing him with infinite essence energy, it would have been impossible for him to support the simultaneous circulation of the 8 essence energy arts. As the 8 essence energy arts circulated, all sorts of life providences and life souls were automatically activated. What was even stranger was that the life providences and life souls were stripped from Zhou Wen's body, forming independent entities. The 8 life souls that had fused with the life providences appeared in 8 different directions around Zhou Wen. The primordial human sovereign was a projection of a sovereign. The heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder was a book. The supreme Hell King was Zhou Wen's actual appearance. The new era was a ring with a clown pattern. The chaos egg was an egg. The sword pill was still in the form of a pill and hadn't transformed into a sword. The demon god bloodline catalog was a blood shadow whose outline resembled Zhou Wen's. Finally, there was a point that was constantly changing. It looked like a point, but there seemed to be countless stars circulating within it, constantly changing between life and death. Zhou Wen knew that it was likely the perfect body life soul that Glimmer had evolved. He didn't even have the time to look at its name. Originally, these life souls were condensed by Zhou Wen. Although he had used a simulation method, he still felt a bloodline connection with Zhou Wen when he used them. But now, the 8 life souls were so unfamiliar that it left him terrified. Zhou Wen could no longer sense the connection he should have from them. It was as though they weren't life souls and life providences condensed by Zhou Wen. They were clearly enjoying the essence energy on Zhou Wen's body, but they didn't belong to him. This feeling left him so depressed that he nearly vomited blood. The only life soul that was connected to Zhou Wen by blood was Slaughterer. At the same time, Slaughterer emitted a terrifying killing intent that affected Zhou Wen's mind to a certain extent. If not for Zhou Wen's extraordinary willpower, he would have long been controlled by the killing intent and become a lunatic who only knew how to kill. At that moment, the 8 life souls erupted with terrifying power at the same time. Zhou Wen couldn't be more familiar with these powers. He had used most of them countless times. However, this time, the powers didn't help Zhou Wen, but became his enemy. The sword hummed like a song as 3,000 sword intents fused into one pill. The sword pill slashed at Zhou Wen with supreme sword Dao will. Chapter 1080. In the past, when Zhou Wen used sword pill, he didn't find the sword intent terrifying. However, now that sword pill had become an enemy, he realized how terrifying it was after personally experiencing its sword intent. Under the pressure of the terrifying sword intent, Slaughterer's killing intent erupted. Zhou Wen didn't plan on attacking, but his body was driven by Slaughterer's power. It was as though someone was hugging him from behind as he guided him to attack. Zhou Wen was somewhat depressed. Wasn't this hitting himself? It wasn't easy for him to condense the sword pill life soul and its corresponding life providence. It would be a pity if he crippled it. Boom! The sword beam collided with Slaughterer's power. Sword pill tore through the essence energy and stabbed at Zhou Wen's palm at high speeds. However, the closer sword pill got to Zhou Wen's palm, the slower it became. The resistance it encountered from the essence energy increased. When it was a few centimeters away from his palm, its forward speed almost stopped. Buzz! At that moment, sword pill suddenly transformed into a sword. It broke through Slaughterer's essence energy and pierced through Zhou Wen's palm. Damn it! I should be the first person in history to be injured by a life soul I condensed, right? Zhou knew that he couldn't hesitate any longer. He wanted to cooperate with Slaughterer and fight seriously. Regardless of whether it was condensed by him or not, he had to destroy it first if he wanted his life. Just as he was about to pull out the sword pill that had pierced through his palm, the blood shadow condensed by the demon god body attacked Zhou, one from the other side. With a flash, it appeared behind Zhou. Zhou turned around and swung his fist. Just as he was about to hit the demon god body, the blood shadow that looked like Zhou instantly transformed into a blood snake. It wrapped around Zhou's arm and bit at his neck. F***KU. Zhou made a prompt decision and slammed his head into the blood snake's head. However, the blood snake changed again. It flapped its wings and transformed into a blood bird, dodging Zhou's head strike. Its claws left several bloody marks on Zhou's scalp, injuring his skull. The primordial human emperor and supreme hell king also attacked from both sides. One fist carried a brilliant divine light, while the other carried invisible negative karma flames. Zhou used his left hand to pull out the sword pill that had pierced through his right hand. He quickly moved, hoping to dodge the attacks of primordial human sovereign and supreme hell king. At the same time, he summoned his companion beasts. However, the companion beasts didn't react at all. Even demonic neonate didn't move. Two streams of light flashed and appeared close to Zhou out of thin air. Zhou had just dodged the attacks of the primordial human sovereign and supreme hell king, so it was already difficult for him to muster any strength. Furthermore, the two streams of light appeared out of thin air as though they had teleported. All Zhou could do was try his best to twist his body. With his outstanding reaction speed and calm mind, he dodged the two streams of light that appeared out of thin air in front of his chest and the back of his head. He didn't get hit by the fatal attack. At that instant, the two streams of light vanished again, but Zhou could clearly see that one of the streams of light was the new Era Ring Life Soul, and the other was the perfect body life soul that Glimmer had just evolved. Zhou moved at high speed and took the opportunity to punch Supreme Hell King. He wanted to kill one first, but he was already overwhelmed by the attacks of 8 life souls and couldn't use companion beasts. However, when Zhou's fist struck Supreme Hell King's body, it didn't hit his corporeal body. The palm seemed to pass through space and enter purgatory. The palm in Supreme Hell King's body was instantly enveloped by flames. In the flames, the flesh and blood on the palm rapidly disintegrated. Zhou hurriedly retracted his hand, but the injury on his hand couldn't recover. "Do you really think I'm easy to bully?" Zhou was infuriated as well. He used Transcendent Flying Immortal and the Heart-Defying Sword. As his body moved like a phantom, sword beams crisscrossed. A huge ball rolled over. It was none other than the Chaos Egg. When Zhou's sword beams slashed at the Chaos Egg, they were instantly absorbed as though they had encountered a sponge. In the past, when Zhou used these life souls to restrain others, he felt extremely comfortable, but now that he was besieged by these life souls, he knew how uncomfortable it was. The easiest thing for humans to ignore was what they already had. Only when he became enemies with his life soul did Zhou seem to see his life soul clearly. It wasn't that Zhou didn't understand them in the past, but that he couldn't change his perspective. In the past, Zhou could unleash their characteristics, but he would never know what it felt like to be attacked by the power of these life souls. Apart from the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder not moving, the other 7 life souls surrounded Zhou as though they wanted to kill him. Although Zhou had already pushed his technique and strength to its peak, he was still at a disadvantage in a 1-on-7 situation. He was constantly injured by his life soul, and the situation was rather terrible. The injuries on his body made Zhou calmer and calmer. The power of Slaughterer gradually fused with Zhou. With the augmentation of infinite essence energy, Zhou's strength became stronger and stronger. Since I can condense all of you, I can naturally destroy all of you. Zhou's eyes were calm. Slaughterer seemed to have fused with his body and was no longer the lonely life soul that hugged him. Seeing Sword Pill fly over again, Zhou raised his finger as a sword and stabbed at it. At that moment, Zhou Wen's essence energy already had the power of immortal slaying. With sword against sword, Zhou Wen's sword aura and sword intent were stronger than Sword Pill's. When the sword aura collided, Sword Pill's sword aura instantly shattered. Even the sword blade shattered. The demon beast formed by the demon god body had already pounced at Zhou Wen's back. Zhou Wen didn't turn his head or dodge. Instead, he quickly retreated and slammed into the demon beast. The terrifying essence energy directly shattered the demon beast formed by the demon god body, turning it into specks of blood that splattered everywhere. He suddenly extended his left hand and grabbed at his ear. The new era ring that had teleported out was caught between his fingertips before being crushed with one finger. Zhou Wen's every move carried the terrifying power of immortal slaying. Combined with his strength and slaughterer's augmentation, he slaughtered his former life souls. One life soul after another that once belonged to him was shattered by him. Sword Pill, New Era, Demon God Body, Supreme Hell King, Primordial Human Sovereign, Singularity, and even the Chaos Egg with the strongest defense were split into two by Zhou Wen. Apart from the power of immortal slaying, there was another important reason. Zhou Wen knew them too well. No life soul could withstand a single strike from him. The power of immortal slaying, which he had once used once, could now be used wantonly. He didn't feel any weakness at all. Only the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder was left floating there. The other life souls that Zhou Wen had painstakingly condensed shattered into dust. Zhou Wen looked at the heaven-opening scripture of the highest elder with calm eyes. He raised his palm and cleaved down like a blade. Chapter 1081. After Cave Era was defeated, no guardian challenged you again. Time ticked by until there was only 1 second left in the ranking battles countdown. Finally, another guardian challenged you. Indeed, a half-human like you won't easily obtain first place. Zhang Chunqiu looked at the cube and sighed. Even Cave Era, which has the power of time, was defeated. Are there any guardians with powers stronger than time? Zhang Yuji asked in puzzlement. Zhang Chunqiu smiled and said, time is indeed a very powerful attribute. In theory, time and space should be considered top powers among the various attributes. However, at that realm, attributes aren't the most important. The strength of skills is no longer an important criterion for determining combat strength. Then how do we tell who's strong and who's weak? Zhang Yuji asked. It depends on whose willpower is stronger, whose intelligence is deeper, and whose on-the-spot performance is better. At that stage, there are only weak people and no weak abilities. Any ability, even if it looks weak, can become the key to victory as long as it's used properly. Zhang Chunqiu paused for a moment before adding, of course, this is when the difference in strength isn't too great. If the difference in strength is too great, it's another matter. However, Ya's strength and abilities should be at the top on Earth. It's impossible for a power that can suppress him to appear on Earth. Why can't it appear? Didn't you say that there's a stronger calamity grade above the terror grade? Zhang Yuji remained puzzled. A calamity grade can naturally crush a terror grade, but there are only two possibilities for a calamity grade to appear on Earth. One is the descent of a calamity grade expert from a dimension. However, when a calamity grade expert from a dimension descends, they will be restricted by Earth's laws. It's impossible for them to unleash calamity grade strength. If they forcefully use calamity grade strength, they might even be struck down to the mythical stage by the laws. Zhang Chunqiu organized his words and continued. There's another possibility. After a guardian contracts with a human, they can borrow the human's body to advance to the calamity grade. The guardians born in this era have had too little time. Not to mention advancing to the calamity grade, there aren't even a few at the terror grade. Therefore, if a calamity appears on Earth, the only possibility is that a calamity grade guardian has survived the previous war. Like the one in our fiend tomb? Zhang Yuji asked. Zhang Chunqiu didn't answer and continued. However, Although the Guardians who were lucky enough to survive the war in the past were extremely powerful, the humans who contracted them couldn't live that long. After leaving the humans, their strength was once again suppressed by Earth's rules. Even if they have calamity-grade strength, it's impossible for them to use it on Earth unless they contract with humans again. There are so many humans on Earth. It shouldn't be difficult to find a contractor, right? Zhang Yuji said after thinking about it. It's not that easy. There must be some kind of restriction. Otherwise, do you think that the one in our family doesn't want to come out? Zhang Chunxiu smiled and said, in short, from the looks of it, he still has a chance. As long as he can survive the next single-dimensional challenge, he might become the final victor. Brother, do you wish for you to win or for him to lose? Zhang Yuji blinked and asked. From my standpoint, I hope he wins, but his chances aren't high. Zhang Chunxiu answered strangely. The person challenging you was a guardian named Juyue. It was a very unfamiliar name. He hadn't appeared on the rankings before, so no one knew what abilities he had. After the battle began, they immediately knew what ability he had, because the characteristics of his ability were too obvious. Teleportation. He constantly teleported. Ye's continuous attacks failed to touch a corner of Jiyue's clothes. However, Jiyue had no intention of counterattacking. When he attacked, he would teleport and dodge. When he didn't attack, he wouldn't move. Instead of saying that he was fighting, it looked more like he was stalling for time. He didn't launch any meaningless attacks as he directly entered his terror form. His body transformed into a shadow of light, but Jiyue could also transform into his terror form. After his terror form, he vanished even more decisively than Ye. However, Jiyue, who had transformed into his terror form, still had no intention of counterattacking. He continued dodging. Now, everyone could tell that Jiyue was stalling for time, but they didn't understand why he was stalling for time. What is Jiyue trying to do? It doesn't make sense if he wants to expend Ye's essence energy. His teleportation consumes more essence energy than Ye's, Xia Xianyue said in thought as she looked at the cube screen. Xia Luchuan looked at the screen and said with a frown, I have an ominous feeling. I'm afraid this battle for first place won't end so easily. Why do you say that? Xia Xianyue asked in puzzlement. I don't know. It's just a feeling. Xia Luchuan shook his head slightly, but his expression was somewhat solemn. Just as Xia Xianyue had said, Juyue's constant teleportation in his terror form drained him much more than Ye's. If the battle continued, you would definitely win. However, he didn't continue attacking. He stopped and left his terror form. He sat down in the arena and placed Primordial Immortal's sword on his lap. Why aren't you fighting? Jiyue also left his terror form and asked you in puzzlement. Don't you need time to prepare to deal with me? I'll give you time, you said indifferently. Jiyue looked at you with a complicated expression. You know that I need time to deal with you. Why don't you defeat me as soon as possible? If you're fast enough, you might be able to avoid a lot of trouble. Trouble will always come. Besides, I'm not afraid of trouble, you said. You won't regret it? Jiyue asked you. People aren't born to regret, but to do what they want to do, you answered. Jiyue looked at you and sighed. If I had met you earlier, perhaps we could have become friends. We won't be friends. I've long stopped making friends, you said. Why? Jiyue asked you in a daze. Because I only have one life. I have too many friends to share, you answered. Jiyue didn't say another word when he heard that. All he did was look at you silently. After a moment, Jiyue said, if you attack now and can defeat me in 15 minutes, you will still have a chance. You had no intention of moving. He continued sitting there with his eyes closed. Jiyue looked at him and asked, do you think I'm lying to you? No, I believe you are telling the truth, you said with certainty. Then why aren't you fighting? Jiyue asked curiously. Because I don't want to have you as a friend, so I won't take anything that belongs to you, you said. Jiyue looked at you with a strange expression. After a while, he wanted to say something, but his expression suddenly changed. He glanced at the void and sighed. It's too late now. In the void, a beam of light descended and illuminated the entire cube arena. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.